Chapter 85. Yi Xian turned around and left on his sword. However, his speed was too slow. Too slow, too slow. It was like a tortoise was crawling. Behind Yi Xian, Bai Zhe was dumbfounded. Sword kinesis flight? Yi Xian was indeed sword kinesis flight. But something was amiss. Soon, Yi Xian arrived in front of a dense forest on his sword. At this moment, a person who was running not far away stopped. This person was Mo Yunqi, who was cultivating crazily. Mo Yunqi looked at Yi Xian, who was flying on his sword in the distance with a face full of shock. Bandit Yi! What are you doing? Yi Xian placed his hands behind his back and glanced at Mo Yunqi. Please teach me, Sword Immortal Yi. Thank you. With that said, he flew off into the distance on his sword. Mo Yunqi was dumbfounded and only regained his senses after a while. This guy, after some time, Yi Xian arrived at Old Man Ji's courtyard on his sword. Unfortunately, he couldn't fly over the wall because the distance between the sword and the ground was too close. Thus, Yi Xian entered through the door on his sword. Old Man Ji was lying on the reclining chair. As usual, his entire body emitted an unpleasant smell of alcohol. At this moment, Old Man Ji suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian quickly straightened his body. He placed his hands behind his back and looked at Old Man Ji. Old Man Ji, please teach me, Sword Immortal Yi. Old Man Ji suddenly spat out a mouthful of alcohol. He glanced at Yi Xian and tapped with his finger. A gold coin landed in front of Yi Xian. Hurry up and find a doctor. Don't delay. Yi Xian was speechless. 2 hours later, Yi Xian sat in front of the stone steps of Kanglin Palace. In front of him, the elegant spirit sword floated quietly. Looking at the spirit elegant sword before him, Yi Xian was a little worried. He could indeed fly on his sword now, but he couldn't increase his speed no matter how hard he tried. Not only that, but he also found it extremely strenuous to fly on his sword. Something must have gone wrong. But the question was, what was the problem? No matter how he thought about it, he could not understand. A moment later, Yi Xian stopped thinking about this problem and started cultivating the sword control technique. Under his control, the spirit elegant sword kept flying above his head at a very fast speed. It was at least twice as fast as before. Not only that, but he could control it even more smoothly now. When facing an enemy, the power of his imperial sword technique was not small. It should be said that it had a miraculous effect. Unfortunately, he always felt that there was something lacking, but he didn't know what it was. He asked Old Ji, but Old Ji didn't understand at all. In other words, Old Ji didn't want to teach him anything about the sword Dao. This made Yi Xian a little depressed. The mysterious woman had not woken up yet, so he had no one to ask. He could only figure it out himself. In a dense forest at the back of the mountain, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground while a sword flew across the field continuously. Every time the exquisite sword flew across, a large tree in the field would be cut in half at the waist. From time to time, Mo Yunqi would come to the forest to fight with him. However, every time Mo Yunqi was about to lose, he would immediately flee. Just like that, day after day passed. On a certain morning, in Old Ji's courtyard, an old man suddenly appeared. The person who came was the dean of Karaki College, Li Xuansong. Old Ji lay on the reclining chair, still drunk, and didn't look like he was about to wake up. Li Xuansong glanced at Old Ji and said with a smile, "Old Ji, your days are really comfortable." Old Ji said indifferently, "Spit it out." Li Xuansong wasn't angry. He glanced at the back mountain and said with a smile, "An unknown mystic realm was discovered in the Jade Mountain range of the Ning Kingdom's capital. The owner of that mystic realm should have been left behind by the former #1 expert of the Ning Kingdom, Tuoba Fu. Back then, Tuoba Fu had already broken through to the Dharma realm. There must be many good things in this mystic realm. This time, the Ning Kingdom is open to the surrounding countries. As long as one is 20 years old or below, they can participate. How about it? Will the Azure Water Academy participate?" "No." Old Ji answered decisively. Li Xuansong said with a smile, "Not participating? You guys will definitely participate." At this moment, Old Ji suddenly opened his eyes. In the next moment, he was about to disappear on the spot. At this moment, Li Xuansong, who was in front of him, suddenly slammed his palm in front of him. Boom! In an instant, the entire small courtyard shattered. In the back mountain, the expressions of Yi Xian and the others changed drastically as they rushed toward the Azure Water Palace. Above a ruin, Li Xuanzong and Old Ji faced each other from afar. Behind Li Xuanzong was a black-robed man. In the black-robed man's hand was a little girl. This little girl was Yi Ling. Li Xuanzong looked coldly at Old Ji and said with a smile, "Tell Yi Xian that if he doesn't participate, then let his sister die in the mystic realm." With that said, he turned to leave with the black-robed man. At this moment, an angry roar suddenly sounded from below. "Old dog, put my sister down." As the voice fell, a sword beam soared into the sky and slashed at Li Xuanzong. In the air, Li Xuanzong's lips curled into a mocking smile as he pressed down with his right hand. Boom! The sword beam shattered, and at the same time, a sword fell straight down, heading straight for Yi Xian. Old Ji suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. With a gentle pull of his right hand, the force in the sword was instantly dissipated. Immediately following that, he waved his right hand, and the spirit-elegant sword landed steadily in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian wanted to make a move, but he was stopped by Old Ji. Old Ji stared at Li Xuanzong in the air. "It seems that in order to kill him, your Azure Water Academy doesn't care about its reputation at all. You actually sent 2 myriad Dharma realms to capture a defenseless little girl." Reputation? Li Xuanzong's lips curled into a mocking smile. If your Azure Water Academy could kill Dean Gu decisively back then, would it have fallen to this state? Old Ji clenched his fists slowly. "If you dare to touch her, the old man will definitely kill all the students of your Azure Water Academy." Li Xuanzong sneered. "If you dare to touch her, she will definitely die." With that said, he pointed at Yi Xian. "I believe that he won't let you make a move, right?" Yi Xian stared at Li Xuanzong. "Old dog, you are the dean of an academy after all. Why can't you take it out on us?" Li Xuanzong shook his head and smiled. "Reputation? How much is it worth? The old man only knows that if you don't die, our Azure Water Academy won't just lose our reputation in the future, but our 1,000-year foundation." With that said, he looked coldly at Old Ji. "Don't worry, I won't hurt her. I will only throw her into the mystic realm. However, if you dare to touch her, she will definitely die." With that, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon with the black-robed man. Yi Xian wanted to give chase, but he was stopped by Old Ji. Yi Xian looked at Old Ji with bloodshot eyes. Old Ji shook his head. "I'm sorry. I didn't expect them to do this." Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly turned around with his sword in hand. "I don't blame anyone. I only blame myself for being too weak." Old Ji sighed softly. At this moment, Mo Yunqi, Ji Anji, and Bai Zai appeared beside Old Ji. Mo Yunqi's face was ashen. "Old Ji, this Azure Water Academy is 2F** King Shameless." Old Ji said softly, "Reputation? The talent and strength that Yi Xian has displayed has already made them fearful. If they don't act out of desperation and wait for him to grow for a period of time, our Azure Water Academy's main courtyard might accept him. At that time, they won't be able to get rid of him." Mo Yunqi said solemnly, "Can't we inform the main courtyard? Let them come and help?" Old Ji shook his head. "He's not enough. At least he needs to reach Sword Dao Grandmaster before he's 20. At that time, he might attract the main courtyard's attention." Mo Yunqi took a deep breath. "This Azure Water Academy is 2F** King Shameless." At this moment, Ji Anji suddenly said, "He's going down the mountain. He should be going to Ning country." Mo Yunqi suddenly said, "I'll go with him." Bai Zai nodded. "Together." With that, the two of them turned around and left. At this moment, Old Ji suddenly said, "This is a trap for him. That secret realm is a hopeless situation for him. And if you go, it will also be a hopeless situation for you." Mo Yunqi stopped. He thought for a moment and smiled bitterly. "I know it's a hopeless situation. That's why I have to go." With that, he quickly disappeared into the distance. Bai Zai hurriedly followed behind. Old Ji looked at Ji Anji. Ji Anji said softly, "Take care." With that, she turned around and returned to Azure Water Palace. After a while, she went down the mountain with a big bag. In the ruins, Old Ji was silent for a moment. He came to a small hall at the back of the mountain. Inside the small hall, there were all kinds of spirit tablets. There were a lot, more than 1,000 of them. Looking at those spirit tablets, Old Ji did not feel drunk at all. After an unknown amount of time, he suddenly lay on the ground and took the wine gourd from his waist. It's the dean's incompetence, I couldn't protect you. 15 minutes later, an old man suddenly left Azure Water Mountain and went somewhere unknown. Jiang Country's palace. In a dark hall somewhere, an old man sat on the ground and was playing with a black puppy. At this moment, a middle-aged man appeared at the entrance of the hall. The middle-aged man bowed slightly towards the hall and said something. After a while, the old man in the hall suddenly said, "Azure Water Academy is not ordinary despicable," the middle-aged man said solemnly. "That youth has gone to the kingdom of Ning." The old man fell silent for a moment before saying, "Investigate who the black-robed man is. Also, send shadow guards to escort that youth." "Forget it. I'll personally escort him. After all, he's someone who once dared to fight for the kingdom of Jiang." With that, the old man vanished from where he stood. In a private room of the Drunken Immortal restaurant, a black-robed man suddenly appeared in the private room and bowed slightly to the old man in front of him. After a while, the old man sneered, "What a great Azure Water Academy. They really do know how to court death. Pass down the order. Use all forces to investigate the black-robed man who attacked tonight. Also, send people to escort that youth to the kingdom of Ning." "Forget it. The old man will go personally," the black-robed man said solemnly. "Tower Lord, are you openly choosing a side?" The old man said indifferently, "That's right. The old man is choosing a side this time. He's going to fight Azure Water Academy. Icing on the cake will never be as good as delivering charcoal in snowy weather, right?" After saying that, he disappeared on the spot. 2 Boundary Mountain. A man suddenly appeared in front of a thatched hut. The man knelt on one knee. "Lord, that little girl was kidnapped by Azure Water Academy." A moment later, the thatched hut exploded. A little girl walked out. The little girl's face was ashen. "Azure Water Academy? What rubbish is this? If anything happens to her, this lord will slaughter all the students of Azure Water Academy." P.S. There's no more. I don't know how much I've updated. In any case, I've secretly saved up these few days. Finally, it will be published tomorrow. Publishing means that there will be a fee. And a fee means that many of my friends will leave. Just like what the reader said the other day, if there are pirated copies, why should I read the original? Even so, I still hope that I can see your figures tomorrow. I rely on subscriptions to make a living. Therefore, I sincerely hope that the readers who read this book will support the original by subscribing. It's about 10 cents per chapter, which is about 20 to 30 cents per day. And a small subscription from you is a huge support for me. The reason why I didn't choose to publish the book is because there will be a fee if I publish it. Publishing it now will be free. Without further ado, my friends who are staying to read tomorrow, whether you are a lurker or an active person, I hope that after you finish reading, you can leave a message. Even a full stop will do. Let me see who is staying. Or should I say, how many people are staying? Chapter 86. At the foot of Mount Azure Billow. Yi Xian suddenly stopped. In front of him were Mo Yunqi, Bei Zhe, and Ji Anji. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "This is my business. You don't have to get involved." Mo Yunqi was a little dissatisfied. "Damn, how can you say that? You're not treating us as brothers." Yi Xian wanted to say something, but Mo Yunqi suddenly said seriously, "Don't think so much. Yi Ling is not only your sister, but also our sister." With that, he patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly. "Let's not talk about those emotional things. Let's go." Yi Xian looked at the three of them and nodded. After a quarter of an hour, the four of them boarded the cloud ship. To Ning Country. As soon as Yi Xian and the two of them boarded the cloud ship, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and the three of them. The old man bowed slightly to Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, old man is the steward of the cloud ship. Young Master Yi can call me Steward Li." With that he looked around and said, "This time, there are only 4 of you on the cloud ship. In terms of safety, young Master Yi and the 3 of you, don't worry. There are experts guarding the surroundings. In addition, Our 9th building master is also hiding in the dark. If Karaki Academy wants to launch a sneak attack, our drunken immortal building will be the first to stop them. Hearing Steward Lee's words, Mo Yunchi and the other two were shocked. Karaki Academy's overbearing and arrogant attitude could be said to be no worse than Karaki Academy's. But now, this drunken immortal building's attitude towards Yi Xian. It was simply a little flattering. Yi Xian cupped his fists at Steward Lee. I'll remember your help this time. Hearing this, Steward Lee's mouth immediately turned into a bright smile. Young Master Yi, the Tower Master also said that we have already thoroughly investigated the conspiracy of Karaki Academy. Before the four of you arrive at Ning Kingdom, we will definitely give young Master Yi a satisfactory explanation. Yi Xian nodded. Thank you. Manager Li smiled. The four of you should rest early. If there's anything you need, please let us know. With that, he bowed slightly and retreated. At this moment, Mo Yunchi looked at Yi Xian. Are you the illegitimate son of the drunken immortal restaurant's boss? Yi Xian shook his head. Illegitimate child? He naturally knew why the drunken immortal would express such goodwill. All of this was because of the mysterious woman. Yi Xian glanced at the three of them. You guys should rest early. With that, he turned around and left. Ji Anji glanced at Yi Xian and followed. In the same place, Mo Yunchi glanced at Yi Xian's back and sighed. This guy. Luckily I didn't join Karaki Academy back then. This Karaki Academy is too King despicable. Bai Zhe nodded. Despicable. Mo Yunchi looked at Bai Zhe. Big guy this time, there's no chance of survival. Bai Zhe glanced at Mo Yunchi. To die together with you. I'm a little hesitant. F***CK. Inside the private room, the moment Yi Xian entered the private room, he suddenly turned around. Not far from him was Ji Anji. Ji Anji walked in front of Yi Xian. Karaki Academy doesn't dare to hurt her. Yi Xian nodded. I know. Karaki Academy definitely wouldn't dare to kill Yi Ling. Because once they killed Yi Ling, they would have no one to rely on. Moreover, Old Man Ji would take revenge. Karaki Academy also didn't dare to fight to the death. However, they couldn't just let Yi Xian continue to grow. If they let Yi Xian continue to grow, Karaki Academy's situation would only worsen. Ji Anji glanced at Yi Xian. Rest well. We'll bring her back. Yi Xian looked at Ji Anji and said softly, this trip will definitely be very dangerous. Ji Anji looked at Yi Xian. If it wasn't dangerous, we wouldn't have come. After saying that, she opened the bag she brought and took out 2 white steamed buns and handed them to Yi Xian. Don't starve. Yi Xian. A moment later, Ji Anji left. Inside the private room, Yi Xian sat on a chair and took out a small wooden figure. This small wooden figure looked exactly like Yi Ling. Yi Xian looked at the small wooden figure in his hand. His expression was calm and his eyes didn't waver at all. Weak. All along, he felt that he was very strong. At least among the younger generation, Anlancio was the only one who could fight him. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't arrogant at all. And this time, the cruel reality made him realize that he was actually so weak that he couldn't even withstand a single blow. Li Xuansong and the black-robed man had taken Yi Ling away. But what about him? He could only choose to watch. In fact, if not for Old Man Ji, he wouldn't even have the chance to watch. He didn't blame Old Man Ji, nor did he blame anyone. He could only blame himself for being weak. He was too weak. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. If he was weak, he had no right to speak. If he was weak, he could only be bullied by others. If he was weak, he could only endure all kinds of injustice. Yi Xian clenched his fists tightly. Fresh blood seeped out of his palms. And in his body, the spirit-elegant sword trembled slightly. In the end, Yi Xian's entire body actually began to tremble. After an unknown amount of time, his entire body began to emit a faint qi. And at this moment, a white piece of paper floated out from the second floor. On the paper was a sword. Around the sword was a sword intent, and behind the sword intent was a big? Obviously, it was asking what sword intent was this. Imperial capital. News of Yi Ling being kidnapped by Karaki Academy spread. But it didn't take long before almost everyone in the Imperial capital knew about it. In an instant, the entire Imperial capital was in an uproar. Anger. This was the current mood of everyone in the imperial capital. Originally, they didn't really like Songlan Academy. It should be said that they only liked the strong. And when Songlan Academy faced Karaki Academy, they were undoubtedly the weakest side. Hence, in the beginning, everyone stood on Karaki Academy's side. In this world, people naturally preferred the strong. But after what happened, especially the matter of Karaki Academy inviting people from Tang, it could be said that the people in the imperial capital hated them to the extreme. One must know that the state of Jiang and the Tang Empire had fought countless times. How many people from the state of Jiang died under the Tang Empire's cavalry? Especially the ordinary poor people. Most of their relatives were killed by the Tang Empire. There were also the soldiers in the imperial capital. How many of their friends were killed by the Tang Empire soldiers? And Karaki Academy actually invited people from Tang Empire to deal with Yi Xian. One must know that Yi Xian was from the state of Jiang. Therefore, countless people stood on Yi Xian's side without even thinking about it. However, for Karaki Academy, most people only dared to be angry. And now, in order to kill Yi Xian, Karaki Academy actually captured Yi Xian's sister, Yi Ling. She was just an ordinary little girl. Regarding Karaki Academy's actions, it could be said that the entire imperial capital dared to speak up. For a time, the streets and alleys of the imperial capital were talking about Karaki Academy. And when it came to Karaki Academy, everyone had a look of contempt. The reputation of Karaki Academy could be said to be extremely bad. Song Mountain. Karaki Hall. Who is it? An angry shout suddenly sounded from within the Great Hall. In the Great Hall, Li Xuanzong's face was ashen. Who is controlling the public opinion in the imperial capital? At this time, Li Xiu stood up. It should be the drunken immortal house. Maybe the Jiang country's imperial family also has. Li Xuanzong's eyes suddenly turned cold. They have no reason to stand on the side of Songlan Academy. Li Xiu's expression was a little ugly. According to our investigation, when Yi Xian and the others went to the Ning country, the drunken immortal house's 9th floor master personally escorted them. In addition, the previous king of the Jiang country's imperial family also secretly escorted them. Hearing this, everyone's expression in the Great Hall became a little ugly. This was clearly standing on the side of Songlan Academy. The state of Jiang had 3 major forces: Karaki Academy, Drunken Immortal House, and the Jiang country's imperial family. And now, these 2 forces actually stood on the side of Songlan Academy. The situation was not right. Everyone looked at Li Xuanzong, and Li Xuanzong slowly closed his eyes. Li Xiu, did you really find out the origin of that Yi Xian? Li Xiu nodded. He came from Qingqing. Bullshit. Li Xuanzong suddenly roared angrily. How could a tiny Qingqing nurture a swordsman? And a great swordsman at that? Before that youth entered Songlan Academy, he was already a swordsman. This means that he entered Songlan Academy with his skills. And after he returned from Two World City, his strength increased by leaps and bounds, to the point that even Fenju was killed by him. How could this kind of person be an ordinary person? Are you people in charge of intelligence useless? Li Xiu's face was a little pale. The current him could be said to be the most disliked person in Karaki Academy. Back then, if he had been a little more open-minded and accepted Yi Xian into Karaki Academy, then Karaki Academy would definitely have been glorious for countless years. As for Songlan Academy, it would be a dead end, without any hope at all. And now, Songlan Academy had hope, while Karaki Academy's situation was getting worse and worse. All of this was because Karaki Academy had given up on that youth. That youth who wholeheartedly wanted to enter Karaki Academy. Back then, Karaki Academy mocked Yi Xian for being a student they didn't want. Now the entire imperial capital was mocking them. Mocking the trash that Karaki Academy didn't want for killing their strongest student. In the hall, Li Xuanzong suddenly said, "Forget it. What happened in the past can't be undone, so there's no need to continue dwelling on it." As he spoke, he swept a glance at everyone in the hall. "Now what we need to do is to unite. No matter who is behind Yi Xian, or what his background is, he must die. I believe all of you know how Songlan Academy declined back then." Everyone nodded in agreement. At this time, Karaki Academy couldn't afford to have any more problems. Li Xuanzong turned to look at Vice Dean Mo Song nearby. "How are the preparations going?" Mo Song said solemnly, "It's almost done. As for Ning country, King Tuoba Yen has already agreed to our request and will cooperate with us." Li Xuanzong nodded. What about the students from the Great Cloud Empire? Mo Song hesitated for a moment and said, they're requesting a heaven-rank martial technique. If we agree, then they'll dispatch someone from the academy to rush over. Agree. Li Xuanzong suddenly said, if they kill Yi Xian, then not only will they be given a low-grade heaven-rank martial technique, they'll also be given a low-grade heaven-rank cultivation technique. Besides that, they'll be given a light-rank spirit artifact. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they heard this. Heaven rank. That was truly priceless. After so many years of inheritance, Xueqi Academy had less than 5 heaven-rank martial techniques, and 3 of them were only incomplete. As for light-rank spirit artifacts, Xueqi Academy only had 6 of them. And these 6 items had been accumulated by Xueqi Academy for nearly 1,000 years. They'd given them away just like that. Everyone felt a slight pain in their hearts. Suddenly, Li Xuanzong glanced coldly at them. If Yi Xian doesn't die, then he'll definitely lead Azure Wave Academy to rise to prominence. At that time, it's very likely that Xueqi Academy will suffer the same fate as Azure Wave Academy. We can still fight for it if it's gone, but if the academy is gone and the people are gone, then all of that would be meaningless. Everyone within the hall fell silent. Li Xuanzong gazed at Mo Song. What about the others? Mo Song spoke in a low voice. Besides the academies from the Great Cloud Empire, there are academies from other kingdoms that are very interested in this matter. Quite a few renowned experts have come, and one of them is even a monstrous genius on the martial rankings. Besides that, there are also some independent cultivators. All of them are aware of Yi Xian's strength, so they're confident in their ability to come. When he spoke up to hear, he gazed at Mo Song. I heard that some assassin organizations have sent their members. Li Xuanzong's eyes narrowed slightly. Has the Dark Dimension sent anyone? Mo Song shook his head. I don't know. Li Xuanzong fell silent for a moment, and then he said, send someone to tell them that if they kill Yi Xian, then give them a low-grade heaven-rank martial technique as well. No, send the order that anyone who is able to kill Yi Xian will be rewarded with a low-grade heaven-rank martial technique, a low-grade heaven-rank cultivation technique, and a low-grade light-rank spirit artifact. Mo Song gazed at Li Xuanzong and spoke with astonishment. Such rewards are sufficient to kill 10 experts at the Divine Union realm. Perhaps even some old geezers will come. Everyone here was dumbfounded. Not to mention killing Yi Xian. Even killing Old Man Ji would tempt them. Of course, being tempted was one thing, and daring to come was another. Li Xuanzong's expression was ferocious. Since Azure Wave Academy is protecting him, then I'll make Azure Wave Academy the enemy of the entire world. An hour later, the bounty on Yi Xian's head was announced, and the surrounding kingdoms were seething with excitement. This reward. It was truly too terrifying. At this moment, even some of the powers that were closer to the kingdom of Jiang were tempted. Twin World City. Within a tent. Jiang Jiu gazed at the secret memorial before her for a very long time. In the end, she stood up slowly. Notify my imperial father and ask Senior Lin to come here and hold down the fort. As soon as she finished speaking, she swiftly walked out of the tent, and then she leaped onto a horse. An old man behind her hurriedly said, Your Highness, you're the commander of an army, so how can you leave so easily? You. Jiang Jiu took out a gold card, and it was the card that Yi Xian had given her all those years ago. The money within it had been transferred away, but she'd kept it all this time. Jiang Jiu grinned as she gazed at the gold card in her hand. How could I betray my lord when he treated me so well? Chapter 87. In the private room on the cloud ship. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. His body was emitting a strange intent. The reason why it was strange was that this intent was faintly discernible, appearing and disappearing from time to time. At the entrance of the second level, another piece of paper floated in front of Yi Xian. There was still a sword on it, and behind the sword was a big. A moment later, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. He looked at the paper in front of him and said softly, I don't know either. With that, he stood up and the spirit elegant sword suddenly flew out from his body. In the next moment, the entire first level of the prison pagoda was filled with sword light. Around the spirit elegant sword, besides the faint sword light, there was also a faintly discernible intent. At the same time, the compatibility between the sword and him had reached 99%. Now, he no longer needed to use qi to control the sword. Instead, he could use intent to control the sword. The speed of the sword was at least 5 times faster than before. This was true sword control. The cloud ship was getting closer and closer to the country of Ning. The country of Ning. The country of Ning, the country of Jiang, and the country of Tang were very close. It could be said that the 3 countries were in a triangle. However, the country of Ning had an advantage over the country of Jiang and the country of Tang. It could be said that the country of Ning was the strongest among the 3 countries. The main reason was that the country of Tang and the country of Jiang were mortal enemies. The 2 countries had never stopped fighting, and when there was fighting, there would be internal friction. As for the country of Ning, it had always been focused on development. Apart from that, the country of Ning also had a natural geographical advantage. It was surrounded by rich minerals and had no natural enemies. Therefore, the country of Ning could be said to be the strongest among the surrounding countries. As for the country of Ning, it had always maintained a neutral position and never participated in any country's fights. It was also for this reason that the country of Jiang, the country of Tang, and the surrounding countries all wanted to befriend them. Early morning. A cloud ship slowly approached the imperial capital of the country of Ning. Just as it was 100 feet away from the imperial capital of the country of Ning, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of the cloud ship. The middle-aged man looked coldly at the cloud ship. "Do you have a pass?" "Pass?" On the deck of the cloud ship, Yi Xian looked at Ji Anji. Ji Anji said softly, "Any cloud ship without a pass is not allowed to enter the Ning nation without permission. Not even the Drunken Immortal Inn." She paused slightly as she spoke, and then she said, "No matter if it's Immortal Indulgence Inn or Karaki Academy, their influence is very low in the Kingdom of Ning because the imperial family of the Kingdom of Ning is very strong." Back then, these 2 forces were almost completely eradicated by Tuoba Fu, the former #1 expert of Ning country. Although these 2 forces were not completely eradicated in the end, whatever these 2 forces do in Ning country, they have to listen to the royal family of Ning country. Ji Anji's words surprised everyone. One had to know that the Drunken Immortal Restaurant and Karaki Academy were extremely overbearing and arrogant in the country of Jiang. At this moment, Manager Li suddenly appeared before the middle-aged man in the distance. With a tap of his finger, a card fell in front of the middle-aged man, and in next to no time, the middle-aged man turned around and vanished. The cloud ship continued forward, and it wasn't long before it descended slowly and steadily within the imperial capital of the Kingdom of Ning. On the deck of the cloud ship, Manager Li walked over to Yi Xian's group of 4, and then he bowed slightly and said, "Young Master Yi, we've found out about the scheme of the Drunken Immortal Inn. They've issued a huge bounty to the surrounding kingdoms, and the rewards they've offered are extremely high. So, there might be many people participating in the secret realm this time, and none of them are weak. Moreover, their objective is absolutely not to investigate the secret realm but to surround and kill you." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand. Thank you for telling me." Manager Li glanced at Yi Xian. When he saw how composed Yi Xian was, he hesitated for a moment and said, "Young Master Yi, all of them aren't ordinary people, and there are even people on the martial rankings." Yi Xian cupped his fists. "I, Yi Xian, will remember your help today. Goodbye." After saying that, he, Ji Anji, and the other 2 turned around and walked off the cloud ship. Not long later, they disappeared at the end of the street. On the cloud ship, Manager Li turned around, and not far from him stood an old man. It was the 9th floor master of the Drunken Immortal Inn. Manager Li said solemnly, "Floor master, this time, Karaki College can be said to be spending a lot of money to get rid of this young Master Yi, and we've openly sided with him. This is really a bit risky." The 9th floor master said indifferently, "Risky? If we don't help him now, we won't have a chance to remove the estrangement between our Drunken Immortal Inn and him in the future." As he said that, he turned around and looked into the distant horizon. Behind this young man stood a sword immortal. A sword immortal. In the entire Qingzhou, there had never been a sword immortal. Even the firmament swordmaster didn't reach the level of a sword immortal. A sword immortal, not to mention a Karaki College branch. Even Karaki College's main college had to bow down to him. And now, Karaki College wanted to take revenge on this Yi Xian. Thinking of this, the 9th floor master suddenly shook his head and smiled. "Karaki College. Why are you all so outstanding?" Ning Country's Imperial Palace. A woman sat on the dragon throne. She wore a golden dragon robe. The dragon robe was not bulky, on the contrary, it was very fitting, accentuating the woman's curvaceous figure. The woman's long hair was casually scattered behind her head. She looked at the memorial in front of her with a calm expression, and there was a sense of majesty between her brows. The woman in front of her was the king of Ning country, Tuoba Yen. A moment later, Tuoba Yen closed the memorial. "The person I want you to find is this Yi Xian?" In a dark corner a voice sounded. "Your Majesty, it is. We have investigated this person's background. He is from Azure City of Jiang country. His parents are unknown, and he and his younger sister depend on each other. Before the age of 12, he brought his younger sister to live a difficult life in the Yi family. Later, he was valued by the Yi family patriarch and was conferred as the Yi family's young master. Soon, the voice clearly recounted everything that had happened to Yi Xian from Azure City to the imperial capital. Of course, there were some exceptions. A moment later, Tuoba Yen leaned back on the dragon throne and slowly closed her eyes. "You only investigated the surface." In the dark corner the voice said, "According to our analysis, there should be another expert behind this person other than Azure Billow College. However, we can't find out who exactly it is. However, this person killed a steward of the Drunken Immortal Inn on the cloud ship of the Drunken Immortal Inn, but he came out unscathed. Not only that, but the Drunken Immortal Inn is also constantly trying to rope him in. Therefore, according to our analysis, the person behind him should not be simple." Not simple. Tuoba Yen suddenly opened her eyes. Her gaze was as sharp as a knife. Extremely cold. At this moment, she recalled that day in the dense forest, when she was nailed to a tree by 2 rays of sword light. In the face of those 2 rays of sword light, she actually couldn't fight back at all. At this moment, the voice spoke again. "This is the person that Xueqi Academy wants our Ning country to cooperate with and kill. Your Majesty, everyone in the Wisdom Strategy Pavilion requests Your Majesty to reject the deal with Xueqi Academy." Tuoba Yen said indifferently. "Why?" In the corner, the voice sounded again. "This person came from Azure City to the Imperial Capital, then from the Imperial Capital to Two World City, and then from Two World City to the Imperial Capital. During this period, his strength can be described as advancing by leaps and bounds. Coupled with the attitude of the Jiang country's imperial family and the Drunken Immortal Inn towards him, we speculate that there is either an extremely powerful expert or an extremely powerful super force behind this person. Our Jiang country should not make enemies so easily." Tuoba Yen looked indifferently at the portrait of Yi Xian in front of her and did not speak. At this moment, a black-clothed man suddenly appeared in the hall and knelt on one knee. "Your Majesty, there are 76 people who have come to besiege Yi Xian. These 76 people are all peerless geniuses from various countries. Among them, there are 3 on the martial roll. Great Cloud Empire's Xueqi Academy has also sent someone. As for who it is, we have not found out yet. In addition, the Dark World has also sent someone. As for who it is, we have not found out yet." The Dark World. Tuoba Yen frowned slightly. "This assassin organization is also here to join in the fun?" The black-clothed man said in a deep voice. "The reward offered by Xueqi Academy this time is too great. No one is not tempted." Tuoba Yen nodded slightly. "You may leave." The black-clothed man turned and left. The hall fell silent. After a while, Tuoba Yen suddenly said, "After the secret realm opens, our Ning country will not participate in this matter. Inform all the clans and imperial family members of our Ning country not to participate in the encirclement of Yi Xian. Those who disobey will be executed." Understood. The Ning country's imperial capital. As soon as Yi Xian's group of 4 entered the streets, they were surrounded by a group of people. There were more than a dozen people in front of Yi Xian's group. All of them wore the same uniform, and there was a symbol on the left side of their chests. The symbol of Xueqi Academy. Countless people surrounded them from both sides of the street. Obviously, they wanted to watch the show. Across from Yi Xian, a Xueqi student sneered, "I guess you must be Yi Xian from the Zhonglan Academy in Jiang country. I heard that your head is worth a lot of money." Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared on the spot. In the next moment, pest! The man who had just spoken stopped abruptly. At the same time, his throat suddenly split open, and blood splattered. Everyone's expressions changed drastically. Yi Xian did not stop. He opened his palm, and the spirit-elegant sword suddenly flew out. Pest! 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 A strand of light flashed through the group of students of Karaki Academy like a butterfly. Ah! Shrill cries resounded incessantly. At the same time, the heads of the Karaki Academy students rolled to the ground. Not a single one of them survived. Everyone present was dumbfounded. Ji Anji and the others were stunned as well. They exchanged glances, and there was a trace of seriousness in their eyes. At this moment, the evil aura emanating from Yi Xian's body was too heavy. It was as if he had become a completely different person. At this moment, the spirit elegant sword descended firmly in front of Yi Xian, and a drop of blood slowly dripped down from the tip of the spirit elegant sword. Yi Xian sheathed his sword and walked slowly towards the distance. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly stopped because a middle-aged man was standing not too far away from him. The middle-aged man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. This is the Ning country, not the Jiang country. It's not a place where you can behave atrociously. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, he appeared above the middle-aged man. At the same time, his sword slashed down. The sword was extremely swift, and the middle-aged man's body was split into 2 before he could even react. Fresh blood sprayed all over the ground. The sword was sheathed. Yi Xian wiped off the blood on his face and said softly, "I only came to take my younger sister home." As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings with a blank expression. "Where's my younger sister?" Everyone in the surroundings had extremely fearful expressions, and their eyes were filled with astonishment. Right at this moment, Yi Xian's expression suddenly became ferocious. In the next moment, the spirit elegant sword in his hand trembled violently, and a ray of light flashed. Bang! In the distance, a house collapsed with a bang. This fellow has gone mad. Run! Chapter 88. Everyone could see that Yi Xian was not in his right mind at this moment. The surrounding people did not stand around and watch as they fled frantically in all directions. Ji Anji, Mo Yunqi and the other 2 hurried over to Yi Xian. Seeing that Yi Xian was about to continue attacking, Mo Yunqi hugged his arm. "Big brother, calm down, calm down." Yi Xian was stunned. After a while, he turned to look at Mo Yunqi. "What are you doing?" Mo Yunqi looked confused. You don't remember what happened just now?" Yi Xian frowned. "What happened?" Mo Yunqi. At this moment, Bai Zai pointed at the corpses on the ground not far away. Yi Xian looked at the corpses around him and then looked at Mo Yunqi. "You did this?" Mo Yunqi jumped up. "Damn, did you really lose your memory or did you pretend to lose it?" Yi Xian frowned even deeper. "I did this." Mo Yunqi and the other 2. At this moment, Yi Xian shook his head. "Let's go to the secret realm." After saying that, he walked away slowly with his sword in hand. Mo Yunqi said in a low voice, "This guy doesn't look like he's pretending." Bai Zai and Ji Anji nodded. Mo Yunqi sighed. Their relationship as siblings. If anything happens to that girl, I really don't know what will happen to him. Sai, let's go. The 3 hurriedly followed. The current Yi Xian was really not normal. The news that more than 10 Karaki College students were killed by Yi Xian quickly spread to Ning country's Karaki College. Soon, more than 10 Karaki College students rushed out of the college and went straight for Yi Xian. At a crossroad, Yi Xian and the other 3 suddenly stopped. In front of them was the group of Karaki College students who were rushing over. Not far away, among the group of Karaki College students, a man who was the leader pointed at Yi Xian angrily. "This is Ning country, not your Jiang country. You." Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared on the spot. The man's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he was about to retreat. However, a ray of light suddenly slashed towards him like a bolt of lightning. It was too fast. Chi! Before the man could react, his head was sent flying. However, Yi Xian didn't stop there. Under the command of his will, the Lingxiu sword flew out once again. In an instant, one of the Karaki students was sliced in half at the waist. The expressions of the group of students from Karaki Academy turned grim when they witnessed this scene, and they retreated explosively in succession. On the other hand, Yi Xian didn't stop, and he chased after them madly. Impudent! Right at this moment, an angry shout suddenly sounded out in the sky, and then an invisible pressure enveloped Yi Xian. an expert of the Nether Passage realm. Yi Xian suddenly looked up. Above his head stood an old man. The old man glared at him with undisguised killing intent. The old man was just about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot, his entire person soaring into the sky. A single strike to decide life and death. In midair, the old man's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly overlapped his hands before pressing them down. Bang! A shapeless wave shook down from the sky, but the ray of light from the sword below easily tore it apart. In the next moment, Chi! A head dripping with blood fell from the sky. Everyone in the surroundings was dumbstruck. Especially the group of Xueqi Academy students nearby. They were completely petrified. That old man was an elder of Xueqi Academy's outer court. He was a genuine expert of the Nether Passage realm. However, he'd been instantly killed with a single strike? Xueqi and the others were slightly shocked as well. They knew that Yi Xian was very strong, and they knew that he definitely had the strength to defeat an expert of the Nether Passage realm. However, they'd never imagined that Yi Xian would actually be able to instantly kill an expert of the Nether Passage realm. An instant kill. In midair, Yi Xian sheathed his sword and slowly landed on the ground. He raised his head to look at the group of Xueqi Academy students nearby. Their expressions changed drastically, and they turned to flee. Yi Xian originally wanted to chase after them, but at this time, Xueqi suddenly appeared beside him. Xueqi tightly held onto Yi Xian's arm. Big brother, don't chase after them. Let's go find my sister. Let's find my sister first. He could see it now. Yi Xian was really abnormal. It should be said that there was something wrong with his mind. This guy now wanted to kill anyone he saw, and the more he killed, the more excited he became. They had to find Yi Ling as soon as possible. Otherwise, who knew what this guy would do? After Xueqi pulled Yi Xian away for a while, Yi Xian suddenly looked at him. Xueqi, why are you grabbing onto me? Xueqi. An hour later, the four of them arrived at the Jade Mountain Range. The Jade Mountain Range was boundless, and they couldn't see the end. After Yi Xian and the three of them entered the vast mountain range, Bai Zai suddenly frowned. Something's wrong. The four of them stopped. Bai Zai lay on the ground, and he gently sniffed the ground. After a while, he turned to look at Yi Xian and the other two. There's the smell of humans, and there's more than one. More than one. Xueqi was about to speak, but Yi Xian suddenly walked into the distance. Don't be afraid. I'll be in charge of killing, and you guys will be in charge of burying. After saying that, he suddenly sped up. Seeing this scene, Xueqi and the other two's expressions changed drastically. Xueqi hurriedly rushed out. Bandit Yi, calm down. Yi Xian's speed was extremely fast, and behind him, Xueqi and the other two were following closely. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. Just as he stopped, Xueqi appeared beside him. Xueqi was about to speak, but Yi Xian pointed to the ground not far away. Xueqi looked at the ground, and the ground was filled with leaves, and there was nothing else. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly kicked with his right leg, and a stone flew into the ground not far away. Boom! The entire ground suddenly collapsed, and at the same time, countless sharp arrows suddenly shot up from the ground. In an instant, there were hundreds of arrows, and at the tip of each arrow, there was a green liquid, which was obviously extremely poisonous. Seeing this scene, Xueqi's expression changed instantly. If he had gone over just now, he would definitely have been shot into a hedgehog. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly tiptoed, and his entire body floated to the right. Behind a few trees on the right, Yi Xian saw three men. When the three of them saw Yi Xian, their expressions changed instantly. The three of them looked at each other, and just as they were about to attack, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly disappeared, and in the next moment, swish swish swish. The heads of the three men instantly flew off. Yi Xian tiptoed, and his entire body floated out. His speed became faster and faster, and in a short while, he arrived before a large tree. He glanced at the middle of the tree, and there was a small footprint there. There was a moment of silence. Buzz! A sword shot into the sky, but very quickly, the spirit elegant sword returned to his hand. But under his feet, there was an additional bloody head. Yi Xian stomped hard on the head, and it was smashed into pieces. Amazing! At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from not far away. Yi Xian looked up, and there was a long-haired man standing over 30 meters away from him. The man looked slightly ugly, especially his mouth, which was missing a corner. His eyes were also as small as a mouse's, and he looked extremely wretched and ugly. The man grinned, as expected of someone worth such a high price. You really do have some skills. But this is only the beginning. I heard that your sister has been placed in the mystic realm. We'll wait for you there. If you're late, hee. With that, he turned around, and his figure trembled, and he disappeared not far away. At the same time, Yi Xian disappeared on the spot as well. However, his speed was obviously slower than the long-haired man, and the distance between him and the long-haired man was increasing. In the distance, the long-haired man suddenly turned around and glanced at Yi Xian. You better hurry up. Otherwise, your sister will be in a terrible state. Haha. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared before the long-haired man. This person was Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi looked coldly at the long-haired man. You think you're fast? As soon as he finished speaking, Mo Yunqi suddenly vanished on the spot. At the same time, an afterimage suddenly appeared here. The long-haired man's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene. He floated backwards while waving his right hand, and then numerous rays of silver light shot out from his palm. Mo Yunqi's figure flashed and avoided these hidden weapons. Right when he was about to attack, the long-haired man's shrill cry resounded from afar. Mo Yunqi raised his head and looked over. The long-haired man was lying on the ground nearby, and his legs had been chopped off at the base by Yi Xian. Yi Xian had no intention to kill the long-haired man. He suddenly stabbed his sword into the long-haired man's collarbone, and then he just dragged the long-haired man towards the distance. The ground was covered in blood. The long-haired man spoke ferociously. Bastard! Give me a swift death. Give me a swift death. Yi Xian paid no attention to the long-haired man, and he just dragged the long-haired man towards the distance. Meanwhile, Bai Zai and Jianji had arrived. Mo Yunqi sighed softly. Why do these people keep offending this crazy sister protector? Crazy sister protector. After interacting with Yi Xian, they realized that Yi Xian was usually very amusing and harmless. However, he had a sore spot, and that was his sister. Whoever dared to touch his sister would instantly change into another person. He was a real crazy sister protector. Mo Yunqi sighed again. Let's go. Among the people who came this time, some will come openly, but there will also be many who play dirty. As he spoke, he looked at Bai Zai and Jianji. Bai Zai, your body is strong enough. You will stay by his side and block the arrows for him. Senior Sister Ji, quickly contact Old Man Ji and see if he can find some reinforcements. To be honest, it's just the four of us. I'm really freaking panicking. Especially that bandit Yi, he's not normal from time to time. Jianji nodded. I'm already contacting him. Bai Zai looked at Mo Yunqi. What about you? What are you doing? Mo Yunqi said softly. My speed is the fastest among the four of us. After entering, I will separate from you guys. I will first look for Xiao Linger and strive to find her before those people. Let's go, now that guy is alone. I'm really worried. After saying that, the three of them hurriedly followed. Yi Xian used his sword to drag the long-haired man out of the dense forest and came to a plain. The long-haired man was still roaring crazily and begging for death. However, Yi Xian did not give him a quick death. All of a sudden, Yi Xian stopped. He turned around and looked at the long-haired man who was constantly howling. Looking at the long-haired man, Yi Xian grinned. In the past I was too kind. That's why they dared to bully my sister. In the future, I won't do it again. After saying that, he suddenly kicked the long-haired man's head. Bang! The head was instantly flung into the air along with a pillar of blood. At the same place, Yi Xian held his sword and walked into the distance. His eyes were a little dull. Little girl, don't worry, brother will bring you home immediately. As long as it's someone who has hurt you, brother will not let them off, not a single one of them. P.S. Another free chapter. Because that chapter has 4,000 words. Count it as a benefit from me to everyone. Chapter 89. At the mouth of a canyon, there was a crystal blue door of light. The crystal blue door of light was like a whirlpool, and it was quite mysterious. At this moment, a young man holding a long sword slowly walked over from afar. The person that had arrived was precisely Yi Xian. Beside Yi Xian were Mo Yunqi and the other two. Jianji glanced at the door of light in the distance and said softly, "This is the secret realm." Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. "I don't know what's waiting for me inside, but I will definitely go, and you guys?" All right. At this moment, Mo Yunqi waved his hand. "You're the one? Gather? Subjugating Quran?" Kaboom! Liquid Meng Fuing Cha. Yi Xian looked at Mo Yunqi and the other two. He didn't say anything else but turned and walked towards the light door. Bei Zhe and Jianji followed behind. Soon, the three of them entered the door of light. At this time, Mo Yunqi took a deep breath. "Shaolinger, please don't let anything happen to you. I still want to eat your cooking." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure trembled and he directly entered the light door. In the field, roughly 15 minutes later, countless afterimages suddenly flew over from all directions. Very quickly, all of these afterimages entered the light door. Somewhere in the sky, an old man stared at the door of light below. This person was the dean of Xueqi Academy, Li Xuansong. Beside him was a black-robed man. The black-robed man suddenly said, "This person isn't simple." Li Xuansong remained expressionless. "It's precisely because he's not simple that he has to die." The black-robed man was silent. Li Xuansong slowly closed his eyes. If necessary, at all costs. On the other side, at the top of a certain tree, two old men were staring at the light gate not far away. They were none other than the previous ruler of Jiang Country, Jiang Yuetian, and the ninth-floor master of the Drunken Immortal Tavern. Jiang Yuetian suddenly looked at the ninth-floor head and said with a smile, "Ninth-floor head, I'm surprised that the Drunken Immortal House has chosen a side this time." The ninth-floor master said indifferently, "You've surprised me as well. After all, if you lose this bet, your Jiang Country's royal family will have to face the crazy revenge of the Xueqi Academy." Jiang Yuetian smiled and said, "I believe the ninth-floor lord is betting a lot this time. How about this, let's work together." The ninth-floor master fell silent. Jiang Yuetian said softly, "There might be some old farts coming this time. We can help him fend off those old monsters. As for the younger ones, he can deal with them himself." After a moment of silence, the ninth-floor master nodded. "All right." Jiang Yuetian turned to look at the door of light in the distance, his expression gradually turning serious. Bet. This time, the royal family of Jiang Country was really gambling. He was betting that there was a big shot behind Yi Xian, a super big shot at that. If he won the bet and the Xueqi Academy lost, the royal family of Jiang Country would obtain countless benefits. Moreover, they would be able to rope in Yi Xian. One must know that Yi Xian had an excellent relationship with the ninth princess. This time, they had publicly chosen a side, and this relationship could become even better. And with Yi Xian's talent, his future would be limitless. The stronger Yi Xian was, the more benefits the royal family of Jiang Country would obtain in the future. But if he lost the bet, the royal family of Jiang Country would directly stand against the Xueqi Academy. At that time, the Xueqi Academy would definitely take revenge on the Jiang Country, and even join forces with the Tang Country to deal with the Jiang Country. Can't afford to lose. Jiang Yuetian slowly closed his eyes. In fact, he did not want to cut off all means of retreat, but there was no other way, because Jiang Jiu had already rushed to the Ning Country. Unless the Jiang Country gave up on Jiang Jiu, there was no difference between Jiang Jiu choosing Yi Xian and the royal family choosing Yi Xian. After a moment, Jiang Yuetian shook his head and sighed. A grown girl can't be kept at home. Somewhere on the ground, a woman in a black dragon robe stood proudly on a boulder. Her hands were behind her back, and her beautiful hair casually fluttered behind her head. She exuded an invisible domineering and majestic aura. This person was Tuoba Yen. Behind Tuoba Yen were an old man and an old woman. Tuoba Yen glanced indifferently at the door of light in the distance. Do you think that young man came to save his sister despite knowing that this is a dead end? Is he stupid, or is he acting on impulse? Behind Tuoba Yen, the old man said coldly, "Stupid. This person's talent is probably only second to Enlancio. If he stays alive, it is not impossible for him to overthrow the Xueqi Academy in the future." He. Shut up. At this moment, the old woman beside the old man suddenly looked coldly at the old man. "I think you're the stupid one." The old man's mouth twitched, but he did not dare to talk back. He just snorted coldly. The old woman looked at the door of light. "Your Majesty, in this old woman's opinion, this person is a true man who values friendship and righteousness." Tuoba Yen said indifferently, "I'm afraid he will only be sacrificing himself for nothing." The old woman shook her head. "I don't think it's a big deal whether he sacrifices himself or not. The main issue is whether he dares to come. If he doesn't come and watch his sister die, he will be a useless person even if he becomes a sword immortal in the future." The old man frowned slightly. "Can't you be more civilized?" The old woman glared at the old man, who pursed his lips and did not dare to say anything else. On the stone, Tuoba Yen said indifferently, "Aunt Zhong is right. If he doesn't come today, he will not be a man even if he becomes a sword immortal in the future." At this moment, a black-robed man appeared not far behind Tuoba Yen and knelt on one knee. "Your Majesty, the Dean of the country of Zhong's Karaki Academy, Li Xuansong, asked us why we violated the contract and did not send people to kill Yi Xian." Tuoba Yen turned to look at the black-robed man. "Tell him to scram." The black-robed man was stunned before he turned and left. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. At that moment, he was in a grassland surrounded by mountains. Above him was a blue sky with white clouds. A mystic realm? The so-called mystic realm was actually no different from the outside world. It could be understood as the inside and outside of the house were still in the original world. It was just that this area was separated from the outside world by a mystic technique. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly frowned because he did not notice Jianji and the other two. Were they randomly teleported? Yi Xian's frown deepened. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian walked into the distance at a fast speed. Not only did he have to find his sister, Yi Ling, but he also had to meet up with Jianji and the other two. Not long after, a man appeared not far away from him. The man was holding a long black spear. The man sized up Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian, who was not far away, suddenly disappeared on the spot. In the blink of an eye, Yi Xian arrived before the man with the spear. The man's pupils constricted to the size of a needle. The next moment, he leaped and smashed his spear down. Peak airborne realm. More than that, when the spear smashed down, a dreadful flame gushed out of the tip of the spear. The powerful flame instantly shrouded Yi Xian. However, a sword howl resounded, and the flame was instantly torn open. In the next moment, Yi Xian was already a few meters behind the man with the spear. Behind Yi Xian, the man with the spear stared blankly into the distance. "I should have made the first move." As soon as he finished speaking, his head tilted to the side and fell from his neck. Blood sprayed out like a fountain. Yi Xian lowered his head to look at his hand. His palm was a bloody mess. And it wasn't just his palm. His entire arm was a bloody mess. In that instant, if he hadn't made the first move, it was very likely that he would have died. Even if he didn't die, it would have been a lose-lose situation. Because the man's attack didn't just contain spear intent, he had executed an Earth-rank martial technique, and it was even a mid-grade Earth-rank martial technique. And because he had made the first move, he had the upper hand, which caused the man with the spear to be killed before the power of the spear could be fully unleashed. If the power of the spear was fully unleashed, unless he summoned the armor of Terra, he would definitely die or be crippled. "I can't look down on anyone." Yi Xian collected his thoughts, took out a white jade bottle, and poured out a pill. Golden Soar Pill. One pill was worth hundreds of thousands of gold coins. Although he was a little reluctant to use it, he had to use it. He had to keep himself in a good state at all times. Because this was just the beginning. Yi Xian walked to the man's corpse and picked up the spear. The spear wasn't an ordinary item. It was a top-grade spiritual weapon. Yi Xian kept the spear in the first floor of the prison pagoda, and then took the bag from the man's waist and threw it into the prison pagoda. Then, he turned around and walked into the distance. He walked very quickly, very quickly. Not long after, he arrived at a river. The river wasn't very wide. It was only a few meters wide. Yi Xian glanced at the river, and then he walked to the bank. Suddenly, he drew his sword and slashed at the river in front of him. This slash came without any warning. At the moment when Yi Xian's sword slashed down, A pillar of water suddenly shot up from the river in front of him. Then, a figure retreated rapidly from the water pillar. Soon, the figure retreated to the bank opposite Yi Xian. It was a man in a black robe. The man's hands were hidden in his sleeves, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "How did you know I was in the water?" Yi Xian glanced at the man in the black robe. "Why don't you take a guess?" He used to be good at killing people in the mountain range, so he knew very well where to set up an ambush and where to launch a sneak attack. After he entered the secret realm, he knew that he was the prey, and those who came to kill him would definitely know where he was. At such a time, he naturally had to be extremely careful, because the slightest carelessness could lead to his death. The facts proved that he was right to be careful. The man in the black robe opposite Yi Xian was about to speak when the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly slashed out. In the distance, the man's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly pressed his hands together. Hiss! Two golden claws directly clasped onto Yi Xian's spirit grace sword. However, the golden claws split apart because the spirit grace sword was a mid-grade light-rank weapon, whereas the claws were merely supreme-grade spirit weapons. Right at this moment, the spirit grace sword trembled violently, and the claws in the man's hands shattered with a bang. The man's expression changed drastically, and he retreated explosively. The spirit grace sword didn't pursue the man. Instead, it slashed backwards and directly slashed into the river in front of Yi Xian. Bang! The river exploded with a bang. In the next moment, a shrill cry resounded from below the river, and it wasn't long before the river in front of Yi Xian was dyed red. In the distance, the man in the black robe looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. "How could you possibly know?" Yi Xian glanced at the man in the black robe indifferently. "You're so weak. If you didn't have any helpers, how would you dare to look for me?" "Monster!" The man in the black robe stared fixedly at Yi Xian, and his eyes were filled with extreme shock. Not only was the man in front of him extremely powerful, his intelligence was also heaven-defying. The man in the black robe said in a low voice, "I withdraw." Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared before the man in the black robe with his sword, and he slashed out with his sword. Hiss! The man's head flew into the air instantly. Yi Xian used his fingers to gently wipe away the fresh blood on the spirit grace sword. "I'm sorry, I don't agree." At this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly sounded out from behind Yi Xian. As the footsteps sounded, the river in front of Yi Xian suddenly boiled violently. Not only that, but the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet also began to tremble. Intent. A powerful intent enveloped Yi Xian's surroundings. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the spirit grace sword landed steadily in his palm. Looking at the spirit grace sword in his hand, Yi Xian said softly, "No matter who the person behind us is, let's kill him with one slash, all right?" There was a moment of silence. Bas! A sword's hum suddenly resounded through the sky. Chapter 90. The sword understood the will of man. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly when he saw the spirit sword resonate with him, and it was a slightly savage smile. Yi Xian turned around and saw a man standing not too far away from him. The man wore a snow-white robe that dragged on the ground, and there were 4 plum blossoms embroidered on it. The man gazed at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian gazed at the man and didn't speak as well. Both of them stood in confrontation just like that. On many occasions, the first to attack would allow one to seize the initiative, but it was also possible for one to expose one's weakness first. Obviously, neither of them wanted to attack first at this moment. However, this sort of stalemate didn't last for long because Yi Xian moved. A swordsman. What was the most important thing for a swordsman when facing an enemy? It was naturally confidence. Moreover, what he needed the most when deciding life and death with a single strike of his sword was confidence. "It's fine if I don't attack, but once I do, I'll decide your life and death." At the moment Yi Xian moved, a strand of overbearing sword aura enveloped the man. When he sensed the sword aura emanated from Yi Xian, the man's pupils instantly constricted. What a formidable sword aura! What a formidable sword technique! The long-robed man slowly closed his eyes. Bang! A terrifying imposing aura swept out from within him, and it forcefully obstructed Yi Xian's sword aura. The imposing aura of the Nether Passage realm and an unknown concept. The two of them combined into one to forcefully obstruct Yi Xian's sword aura. At the same time, the man suddenly spread his palms open. Mountain water howl. Bang! The river behind Yi Xian suddenly trembled violently, and then countless water arrows flew up from within the river and shot explosively towards Yi Xian. On the other hand, the ground beneath the man's feet suddenly split open, and then countless rocks shot into the sky and instantly drowned Yi Xian beneath them. Right at this moment, a sword howl resounded. Along with this sword howl, a strand of light suddenly flashed into appearance amidst the rocks. Hiss! The sound of something tearing resounded. In the next moment, Yi Xian appeared several feet behind the long-robed man. In the air, the countless water arrows dissipated with a loud bang, and the gravel also fell to the ground in an instant. Everything returned to normal. Behind Yi Xian, between the eyebrows of the long-robed man, a drop of blood slowly dripped down. He stared blankly into the distance. Sword Will, you are not the great swordsman. As his voice faded, there was no longer any color in his eyes. Yi Xian opened his palm and the spirit elegant sword suddenly flew in front of the man in long robe. In the blink of an eye, it returned to Yi Xian's palm and on the tip of the sword hung a money pouch. Yi Xian threw the bag of money into the world prison pagoda and continued forward. Not long after Yi Xian left, a man and a woman appeared in the field. The man was tall and carried a large saber on his back. There was a very obvious scar on his face. The woman was petite and had several whips on the back of her head. She had 2 short sabers hanging from her waist. The woman glanced at the long-robed man's corpse in the distance. Snow Plum Blossom. This person should be Chu's young master Snow Plum. This person reached the Nether Passage realm at the age of 20, and comprehended the concept of mountains and rivers. He is known as the most promising person in the younger generation of Chu. I never thought that he would be killed by this Yi Xian in one strike here. As she said this, she looked at the knife-scarred man. Brother, although Yi Xian is not on the martial roll, his strength is definitely enough to enter the martial roll. We should give up. The man slowly closed his eyes. If we can kill this person, not only will we be able to become famous, we will also be able to obtain the rewards of Karaki Academy. With those rewards, us brother and sister will no longer need to wander around in the future, and we will be able to rebuild our family. We can't give up on this opportunity. The woman frowned. Brother, that Yi Xian is not someone we can fight against. The man laughed coldly. Since the 2 of us can't fight against him, then call a few more people. Let's go. As he said this, he turned and left into the distance. The petite woman glanced at the corpse on the ground and sighed softly. However, she still hurriedly followed. Yi Xian crossed the river and sprinted forward. He was very fast, or rather, very anxious. He had yet to find Yi Ling, so he was naturally anxious. At that moment, his body was filled with a ruthless aura. Right now, he only wanted to find Yi Ling as soon as possible. After crossing the river, Yi Xian came to a swamp. The swamp was very big, and it would take a lot of time to go around it. Yi Xian did not choose to go around it, because what he needed now was time. However, he did not enter it rashly. Instead, he stood at the edge and looked into the distance. There were many scattered trees around the swamp, and these trees grew in the swamp. Apart from that, there were also some bushes. After a moment of silence, the spirit elegant sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly flew out, and the sword sank into a bush not far to his right. Boom! The thicket exploded with a loud bang, and a figure rapidly retreated from within. The spirit elegant sword did not stop, and it chased after the figure. The sword was very fast, like a bolt of lightning. The person was shocked, and he retreated rapidly. However, at that moment, he forgot that he was in a swamp. After taking a few steps back, his legs sank into the swamp. After sinking into the swamp, the person hurriedly said, "Sir, I'll back out. Chi." The head of the man who spoke flew off. In a short while, the man's body was instantly swallowed by the swamp. The spirit elegant sword flew back to Yi Xian. Yi Xian skimmed into the distance, and every time he moved forward, the spirit elegant sword would fly out. Wherever he thought it was dangerous, the spirit elegant sword would go there to investigate. Just like that, when Yi Xian arrived at the center of the swamp, there were already a few corpses behind him. These people were actually not weak, but it was a pity that they wanted to launch a sneak attack, and they had underestimated the terrifying extent of Yi Xian's flying sword. If they had fought head-on, it would have been impossible for Yi Xian to kill them so easily. Unfortunately, these people wanted to launch a sneak attack, and they had underestimated Yi Xian's vigilance, so they were caught off guard. All of a sudden, Yi Xian stopped. Danger! Yi Xian frowned. He had been fighting with people in the mountains all year round, and it had become an instinct. After Yi Xian stopped, he glanced at his surroundings. He was currently on a single piece of wood, and the closest piece of wood to him was at least 50 feet away. Especially the piece of wood in front of him, which was more than 100 feet away from him. If he flew over and someone suddenly attacked him while he was flying, during this period of time, although he could fly, he would not be able to use his qi, nor would he be able to borrow strength. His strength would be greatly reduced in an instant. Most importantly, what if that single piece of wood disappeared? If he flew, he would definitely die. Retreat? He couldn't retreat now because the person who set the trap would absolutely be able to guess all his escape routes. So, no matter which direction he flew in, the person would definitely react to it. On the piece of wood, Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he suddenly leaped up. When he was about to descend onto the piece of wood in front of him, the piece of wood suddenly exploded into pieces. At the same time, an afterimage flashed over from nowhere. This afterimage was extremely swift, and it arrived above Yi Xian in the blink of an eye. Subsequently, he suddenly slapped his palm down towards Yi Xian. Lightning actually flickered on his palm. Below him, Yi Xian's entire body descended towards the swamp, but his expression was extremely calm. Right when he was about to fall into the swamp, the spirit beauty sword in his hand suddenly transformed into a ray of light that stopped beneath his feet. He stood on the sword. As he stood on the sword, Yi Xian suddenly clenched his right hand into a fist, and then he smashed it upwards. I'll smash your head apart with a single punch. This punch didn't just contain fist force, it also contained battle intent. A sharp sound of air exploding instantly resounded in the surroundings. Bang! Along with the sound of an explosion, the person above Yi Xian was blasted flying while Yi Xian sank into the swamp along with his sword. But in next to no time, the spirit beauty sword slowly lifted him up from the swamp. Yi Xian didn't attack again, and he just slowly floated towards the left while a man floated in midair over 100 m away from him. The man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Flying on a sword? That's utterly impossible. Yi Xian glanced at the man, and then the sword beneath his feet suddenly transformed into a ray of light that slashed towards the man. The ray of light was extremely swift like a bolt of lightning. The man's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly dodged to the right. Meanwhile, the spirit beauty sword actually turned and slashed towards him. The man's eyes narrowed slightly when he witnessed this scene. His right palm instantly flickered with lightning, and then he suddenly slapped it forward. Bang! His palm slapped directly onto the spirit beauty sword. In an instant, countless bolts of lightning and rays of light erupted in midair. Right at this moment, the man's expression suddenly changed drastically because Yi Xian had appeared behind him. The man suddenly turned around and slapped his palm forward. At this moment, the lightning in his palm surged out like a torrent. Yi Xian's fist arrived. It was a very simple punch. But it was exactly this punch that shattered the lightning in the man's hand. At the same time, the man was blasted flying. Meanwhile, a ray of light flashed through the air. The man's expression changed drastically, and he forcefully twisted his body. Hiss! Even though he'd avoided this lethal strike, his right arm had been severed. The spirit beauty sword didn't stop there. It flew back and continued to slash at the man. Right at this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in midair, and the old man hurriedly said, "Please stop. Wheel." Hiss! The old man hadn't even finished speaking when the man's head instantly flew into the air. The old man's expression instantly became ferocious when he witnessed this scene, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "You deserve to die." As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to attack. But right at this moment, a wine gourd suddenly descended from the sky, and countless drops of alcohol surged out from within it. The old man's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly pressed his hands forward. In an instant, the space before him started to warp. Warping matter. A Dharma realm expert. There was a moment of silence in the air, and then the drops of alcohol suddenly stopped moving. But in the next moment, they pierced through space and drowned the old man. Bang! 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 The old man's body fell repeatedly in midair, and numerous explosions resounded incessantly. It didn't take long for the old man to fall into the swamp. But in the next moment, he was about to fly up again. But right at this moment, a figure suddenly stepped on the old man's head. It was Old Man G. Old Man G stepped forcefully on the head of the old man who'd fallen into the swamp. The latter's expression was ferocious, and no matter how he resisted, he was unable to exert any strength. Old Man G fiercely gulped down a mouthful of alcohol, and then he said, "Old one, let me do it." Yi Xian turned around and left. Old Man G turned around and looked into the distance. As he looked, his eyes suddenly became slightly moist. "Master, this time, I won't let my students be bullied again. Just like how you protected me all those years ago." Chapter 91. After Yi Xian left the swamp, he ran all the way. Old Man Ji said that Yi Ling was in a valley hundreds of miles away, and Mo Yunqi and Jianji had already rushed over. It wasn't that Old Man Ji didn't want to make a move, but every time he did, someone would stop him. This person was naturally Li Xuanzong. Outside the secret land, Li Xuanzong stood on a treetop and looked at the mystic realm in the distance expressionlessly. Beside him stood a black-robed man. The black-robed man suddenly said, "Chu State's young master Xueqi has already been killed, and that rushing thunderhand Li Tai, who almost entered the martial ranking, was also killed by this person. Why didn't you stop Old Man Ji when he made his move earlier?" Li Xuanzong said indifferently, "Li Tai's clan is a famous and wealthy clan in the Yu Kingdom. Not only did they lose a super genius from their clan this time, but they also lost a myriad law realm expert. Do you think they will let the matter rest?" The black-robed man was silent. Li Xuanzong looked at the mystic realm. That youth must have a powerful backer or faction behind him. If he doesn't die inside, then someone else will. And the people who come are all monstrous geniuses of this era. These people all have factions of various sizes backing them. The more people he kills, the more enemies he will have. When the time comes, I want to see who can protect him. The black-robed man nodded slightly. This person's natural talent is truly too monstrous. Perhaps only An Lanxiao can suppress him amongst the younger generation. This person really can't be allowed to live. Li Xuanzong slowly closed his eyes. He's dead. On the other side somewhere, the ninth-floor lord of the drunken immortal and suddenly said in a soft voice, "He killed the cold plum prince from Chu State, as well as the rushing thunderhand Li Tai from Li clan of Yu State." Beside ninth-floor master, Jiang Yuetian said in a deep voice, "Li Xuanzong has ulterior motives. He wanted to make Yi Xian and Songlan Academy hate each other. What a vicious heart." The ninth-floor master said calmly, pull with all your might. Karaki Academy is very outstanding. So outstanding that the old man wants to laugh." Jiang Yuetian. Within the secret realm, an afterimage flashed across the mountains at an extremely fast speed, like a gust of wind. This person was Mo Yunqi. After finding out where Yi Ling was, Mo Yunqi immediately moved. At this moment, he raised his speed to the limit. He had to find Yi Ling as soon as possible so that Yi Ling would not fall into the hands of others and be used to threaten Yi Xian. Approximately 15 minutes later, Mo Yun stood up and arrived at a mountain valley. He swept his eyes over the surroundings and saw that the mountain valley was completely empty. There wasn't a single person in sight. Suddenly, Mo Yunqi's expression changed greatly. He flashed backwards, and just as he flashed away, the ground he was originally standing on suddenly collapsed. Mo Yunqi had just stopped when the ground beneath his feet suddenly started wriggling. His expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and his figure soared into the sky. Meanwhile, a figure suddenly shot into the sky from the ground. In the air, Mo Yunqi's hands suddenly spread out, and a flying dagger flew down. Below, the man suddenly crossed his arms. Boom! The ink cloud soaring saber was blocked. But at this moment, he had already retreated 100 feet. Mo Yunqi looked into the distance. In front of him was a thin and small man. The man's body was extremely thin and small. To be precise, he was actually a dwarf. The man looked coldly at Mo Yunqi. "You're not that Yi Xian." Mo Yunqi glanced around. "Where's that little girl?" The man pointed to a mountain wall not far away. Mo Yunqi looked in the direction that the man was pointing. On the mountain wall in the distance, there was a tree that grew out of a crack in the mountain wall, and on the tree there was a little girl hanging. It was Yi Ling. Seeing that Yi Ling was hanging, Mo Yunqi's expression instantly turned cold. He turned to look at the dwarf in front of him and said fiercely, "Mother asterisk cur, you shorty, are you even AF asterisk king man?" As soon as he finished speaking, he charged towards the dwarf. The dwarf's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly stomped his right foot lightly. In an instant, his entire figure vanished into the ground. Mo Yunqi's attack missed, but he didn't continue pursuing the dwarf. Instead, he leaped towards Yi Ling, who was on the mountain wall. He was extremely swift like a spirit ape, and it didn't take long for him to arrive before the tree that Yi Ling was on. Right at this moment, a large saber suddenly slashed down from his right. Mo Yunqi flipped his right hand slightly. In an instant, a cold ray of light shot out like a bolt of lightning from his palm, and it struck the blade of the large saber. Bang! The large saber trembled violently, and the person who held the saber took a few steps back along with the saber. Mo Yunqi was just about to attack again. However, right at this moment, a shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. At the same time, two rays of cold light slashed towards his throat. Mo Yunqi's expression changed slightly. He tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot, and his figure floated over 10 back. Meanwhile, the sound of air being torn apart resounded abruptly. Mo Yunqi's expression changed drastically, and he forcefully twisted his body as he retreated. Hiss! An ink arrow pierced directly into his shoulder. Mo Yunqi turned around and saw a black-clothed man standing on a huge rock nearby. The black-clothed man held a longbow in his hand and carried a quiver of arrows on his back. "He's not here to kill Yi Xian." Right at this moment, the scarred man who held a long saber gazed at Mo Yunqi. He's probably a student of Conglan Academy, and he's on the same side as Yi Xian. Mo Yunqi glanced at everyone present. "To be honest, I won't say anything about how all of you treat Bandit Yi, but..." When he spoke up to hear, he suddenly pointed at Yi Ling, who was on the tree in the distance, and roared furiously. "She's just an ordinary little girl, yet all of you treat her like this. Are you even fucking men?" The scarred man spoke indifferently. If she wants to blame someone, then she can only blame her brother for being Yi Xian. As he spoke, he tightened his grip on the large saber in his hand. "Let's take him down first." As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped up and slashed fiercely towards Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi was just about to attack when an arrow suddenly shot towards him from behind. Mo Yunqi's expression was quite unsightly. He didn't dare attack, and he dodged to the side once more. As soon as he descended to the ground, a petite figure suddenly appeared in front of him, and then two rays of cold light slashed towards his head. Moreover, an ink arrow suddenly shot towards Mo Yunqi from behind. Mo Yunqi suddenly turned around, and he vanished on the spot in the next moment. An afterimage flashed through the battlefield. At this moment, Mo Yunqi's speed had undoubtedly risen to its peak. The longbow-wielding man's pupils constricted, and he was about to retreat when a golden flying knife suddenly appeared in front of him without any warning. The man with the longbow floated backwards, and then he grabbed the bow with both hands before swiftly smashing it forward. Bang! The bow exploded into pieces. However, he dodged this lethal flying knife. Mo Yunqi was just about to attack when a sharp aura suddenly slashed towards him from behind. It was the scarred man. This time, he was unable to dodge because he just stopped, and the scarred man's timing was perfect. He just found this exact spot. Mo Yunqi held the golden flying knife in his hand as he turned around and slashed. Bang! Along with an explosive sound, Mo Yunqi was sent flying along with the flying dagger. As he flew, he directly fell from the sky. Meanwhile, the ground below him suddenly started wriggling. Mo Yunqi's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene. If he were to fall, then he would definitely die. Right at this moment, a flying sword suddenly flew over from afar. In the next moment, the flying sword descended firmly before Mo Yunqi and endured the force of his fall. Mo Yunqi heaved a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, the flying sword suddenly left and slashed down towards the ground below. Hiss! The flying sword instantly slashed into the ground. After a moment of silence, a shrill cry resounded from the ground, and it didn't take long for a spot on the ground to turn red. OM! A sword charged out from beneath the ground, and then it descended firmly before a man who wasn't too far away. It was Yi Xian. Mo Yunqi heaved another sigh of relief when he saw Yi Xian, and then he pointed at the scarred man and his younger sister. "I'll leave them to you. I'll go rescue Xiaolinga. Watch out for the one on the left with the arrow." As soon as he finished speaking, He vanished on the spot. On the other hand, Yi Xian raised his head to look at the scarred man and his younger sister. In the next moment, he suddenly vanished on the spot. His speed was extremely swift, and the exquisite sword before him was even swifter. It was the first to slash towards the scarred man. A wisp of a savage smile appeared on the corners of the scarred man's mouth. "Let me see exactly how strong you are." As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped down from the rock. At the same time, he held the saber with both hands and slashed down fiercely. This slash was extremely large, and it seemed as if it could split a mountain apart. Below, the Lingxiu sword suddenly stopped. At this moment, Yi Xian rushed to the front of the Lingxiu sword. He grabbed the Lingxiu sword and stomped the ground with his right foot. His entire person, along with the sword, soared into the sky. OM! The howl of a sword tore through the surroundings. Subsequently, a sword directly collided with the blade of the large saber. A needle against an awn. Bang! The sword and saber shook violently, and in the blink of an eye, the saber shattered with a bang while the saber-scarred man's entire body was instantly thrown flying. He flew for over 30 m before finally smashing heavily onto an enormous rock. Puh! Fresh blood sprayed from the scarred man's mouth. The scarred man wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth, and then he gazed at the petite woman and roared furiously. "Run! Quickly!" At this moment, he knew that the swordsman young man before him wasn't someone the siblings could go against at all. In the distance, the petite woman didn't flee. She charged over to the scarred man and stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "Let us brother and sister live. We'll return to the clan." Right at this moment, a ray of light flashed. Hiss! The petite woman's head instantly flew into the air. The scarred man was stunned, and then he charged madly at Yi Xian. "I'll fucking kill you." Hiss! A ray of light pierced through the center of the scarred man's forehead. The scarred man's body fell to the ground. Yi Xian glanced at the two corpses on the ground. "If I lose, you won't let us brother and sister off." Bang! Right at this moment, an explosion suddenly resounded from above Yi Xian, and then a figure smashed to the ground from midair. It was Mo Yunqi who smashed to the ground. Puh! Blood sprayed out from Mo Yunqi's mouth. P.S. After it went on sale yesterday, at least 80% of the readers left. Over 6,000 bookmarks, but only around 1,000 read the original version. Azure Phoenix thanks the readers who stayed. I really do. Please cherish it. I love all of you. I also hope that the readers who read pirated copies will subscribe to the original version and support me. I rely on this to make a living. Chapter 92. Yi Xian raised his head and saw a man floating in the air. The man was dressed in black with a long purple ribbon tied around his waist and a piece of sheep-fat white jade. The man's appearance was not particularly handsome, but he was angular and his gaze was deep and sharp, giving people a sense of oppression. The man in black floated in the air and looked down at Yi Xian. His gaze was indifferent without any fluctuation. Yi Xian retracted his gaze and looked at Mo Yunqi who was not far away. "How is it?" Mo Yunqi got up and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. "I was careless." Yi Xian nodded. "Take a rest first." Mo Yunqi said in a deep voice. "Be careful. He's a real expert." Yi Xian nodded and looked up at the man in black in the air. "You're here." The man in black didn't waste any words. His figure trembled and his entire body fell from the sky. His speed was extremely fast. This fall was like a huge mountain crushing down, giving off an extremely overbearing feeling of oppression. "Expert." Yi Xian retracted his gaze. At this moment, he had lost the opportunity to make a move. It should be said that his position had a natural disadvantage. Yi Xian didn't dodge. This was because when two people fought, especially when it was a fight between experts, it was a competition of momentum. Whoever was weaker would be the one being suppressed. And at this moment, he didn't want to be suppressed. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Bang! A formless aura exploded with Yi Xian as the center. Sword aura. This sword aura blocked the aura above Yi Xian's head. However, the man in black didn't stop. On the contrary, his speed became even faster. When the man in black was about 5 feet above Yi Xian's head, he stomped his foot. Bang! A domineering force gushed out from his foot like a volcanic eruption. The powerful force caused the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet to explode. At this moment, the Lingxiu sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly moved. Buzz! Along with the sound of the sword, a ray of sword light soared into the sky. There was a moment of silence. Bang! An earth-shattering sound suddenly resounded. Then, a wave of energy rippled in the air. At the same time, two figures retreated from the energy wave. Both of them retreated more than 10 feet. Mo Yunqi didn't stay idle either. While Yi Xian was fighting with the man in black, he suddenly charged towards Yi Ling. But when he arrived in front of Yi Ling, his expression suddenly changed. In the air, Mo Yunqi suddenly turned. With this turn, a cold light brushed past his ear. He stopped and scanned his surroundings. There was no one around. There was no one around. Mo Yunqi's expression immediately turned ugly. He did not dare to act rashly. Even if he were to save Yi Ling now, it would only make the situation worse because he wasn't confident that he could escape with Yi Ling. As if he had thought of something, Mo Yunqi suddenly said angrily, "Bai Zai, you bastard, can't you hurry over? Don't tell me you're lost." Below, Yi Xian and the man in black stopped at the same time. The man in black glanced at Yi Xian and said, "The information was wrong. You're not the great swordsman." Yi Xian grinned. Surprised. The man in black was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly vanished. "I'm not here to chat with you." As soon as Yi Xian finished speaking, he had arrived in front of the man in black, and a cold light pierced the man's forehead. The man in black narrowed his eyes and tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot. In an instant, his entire body became illusory. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly slashed behind him with his sword. The man in black had appeared behind Yi Xian at some point in time. The black-clothed man's pupils shrank slightly. Obviously, he did not expect Yi Xian to react so quickly and actually be able to react. Without thinking too much, he tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot, and his entire body floated backwards several feet. Before he could stop, a flying sword suddenly appeared in front of him. This flying sword was so fast that he couldn't dodge it. The man in black didn't choose to dodge. He suddenly lifted his right leg and swept it horizontally. This leg was mixed with a strong wind as if it could tear everything apart. Using his leg to fight against the sword, obviously, the man in black was very confident in his leg. At this moment, the sword arrived. Boom! As soon as the two touched, Lingxiu's sword shook violently and the sword gleam around it was shattered. However, at this moment, a hand suddenly grabbed the hilt of Lingxiu's sword. Yi Xian held Lingxiu's sword and stabbed forward. One sword to determine life and death. At this moment, he revealed his trump card. When facing an enemy, he would kill with a single strike when he was confident and not give his opponent any chance. But earlier, he wasn't fully confident. So, he chose to execute life and death with a single strike now. This moment was the best opportunity to execute life and death with a single strike. At the moment that Yi Xian executed life and death with a single strike, the sword aura contained within Lingxiu's sword could instantly reach its limit. Sword aura. This strike carried a peerlessly overbearing aura. At the moment that Yi Xian executed life and death with a single strike, the expression of the man in black changed drastically. He didn't flee because if he fled now, he would definitely die. The man's expression turned savage, and he stomped his right leg on the ground. Shatter! Bang! The ground in an area of 30 m cracked, and subsequently, the man's figure suddenly became illusory. In an instant, countless leg shadows instantly drowned Yi Xian. Every single leg shadow carried a powerful force, and the force was so strong that it caused numerous explosions to resound in the surroundings. It was the sound of air being torn apart. Mo Yunqi's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene. This was at least a mid-grade Earth-rank martial technique, and the black-clothed man's cultivation was at least at the Nether Passage realm. A true monstrous genius. A trace of worry appeared in Mo Yunqi's eyes. Below. Bang! An explosion resounded abruptly, and then a figure was blasted flying. Mo Yunqi instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this figure. Because this figure wasn't Yi Xian, and it was the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man retreated repeatedly, and he retreated for an entire 30 m. Moreover, a strand of blood essence would spray from his mouth with every single step he took back. Moreover, the ground beneath his feet was ceaselessly cracking apart as he retreated. Force was mutual. Earlier, his force had collided head-on with Yi Xian's sword strike in the most violent manner possible, so he naturally suffered a backlash from his own strength at the moment he lost. In next to no time, the black-clothed man stopped moving. At the instant he stopped, the black clothes on his upper body exploded into pieces, and beneath the black clothes was pure silver armor. Moreover, there was a deep crack on the silver armor, and the skin beneath it was already visible. Light rank armor. It was exactly this armor that had blocked Yi Xian's attack just now. Otherwise he would be dead by now. The black-clothed man stared fixedly at Yi Xian, and he was just about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. The black-clothed man's pupils constricted slightly, and then he suddenly stomped his right leg towards the ground. Bang! In an instant, countless bits of rock and dust shot into the sky and blasted towards Yi Xian. However, all of this wasn't able to stop Yi Xian's sword, and the spirit gray sword slashed out from amidst the bits of rock and dust. The black-robed man's expression changed drastically. He took a step back and kicked at the spirit elegance sword. His angle was very tricky. He didn't kick the tip of the spirit elegance sword, but the body of the sword instead. Bang! The spirit gray sword was kicked to the side, but right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. Yi Xian directly blasted his fist towards the black-clothed man. "I'll blast your head apart with a single punch." This punch didn't just contain fist force, it also contained boundless battle intent. The black-clothed man's pupils constricted when he sensed the strength within Yi Xian's fist. Dual cultivation of the sword and martial arts. An instant later. Bang! The black-clothed man's entire body was blasted flying. Yi Xian was just about to attack when an unexpected event occurred. A cold light suddenly appeared behind Yi Xian without any warning. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly as he turned around and punched. Bang! The cold light shattered. However, there wasn't a single person behind him. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings, and he didn't sense anything. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly turned around to look at Mo Yunqi. "Cover me!" As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped a few times and sprinted towards Yi Ling's position. In the distance, Mo Yunqi looked behind Yi Xian instead, and there was a golden flying knife between his fingers. Right at this moment, another cold light silently appeared behind Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't turn around because a golden flying knife had already appeared behind him. Bang! The cold light was directly shattered by the golden flying knife. But right at this moment, an unexpected event occurred. A black arrow suddenly shot over from Yi Xian's right. Yi Xian turned around, and the spirit gray sword in his hand suddenly slashed out. Bang! The black arrow was instantly shattered by Yi Xian's sword, but right at this moment, another arrow appeared in front of him, and behind this arrow, there were two more arrows. The 3 arrows were connected from head to tail. 3 consecutive arrows. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the spirit gray sword appeared in his palm. The next moment, Yi Xian slashed forward with the sword in his hand. On the body of the sword light was dazzling. Chi! The sword fell, and the arrow in front of him was directly shattered. However, after this arrow, another arrow directly hit the tip of the spirit gray sword. Bas! The spirit gray sword shook violently, but that arrow shattered with a loud bang. One had to know that the spirit gray sword was at the light grade. But right at this moment, the last arrow suddenly changed its trajectory and stabbed straight at Yi Xian's chest. Yi Xian punched out. Bang! The arrow directly shattered. Right at this moment, a cold light silently appeared behind Yi Xian once more. Yi Xian didn't turn around, and a shadow flashed by. Mo Yunqi appeared behind Yi Xian, and then a flying dagger slashed down. Bang! The cold light was directly slashed into pieces. Mo Yunqi looked around vigilantly because up until now, he still hadn't discovered exactly who attacked. After Yi Xian shattered the 3 arrows, he glanced coldly at a huge rock on his left. There was a man with a longbow on his back. The man with the longbow stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Dual cultivation of sword and martial arts. Yi Xian paid no attention to the man with the longbow. His figure shook, and he arrived in front of Yi Ling. Yi Ling had already fainted, and her face was abnormally pale. Her hands were tied by the rope, and there were even blood-red marks on them. Yi Xian was expressionless. The spirit gray sword in his hand suddenly flew out and slashed the rope that tied Yi Ling up. Right at the moment Yi Xian stretched out his hand to hug Yi Ling, something unexpected occurred. A shadow silently appeared behind Yi Ling, and in the next moment, a figure appeared in front of Yi Xian. Subsequently, A black sword stabbed directly into Yi Xian's dantian. At the same time, a voice resounded by Yi Xian's ear. "I've been waiting for you for a long time." Chapter 93. Sir. What was he least afraid of? It was naturally the sword. He hadn't cultivated the mysterious woman's cultivation technique for nothing. Of course, this didn't mean that his sword physique was truly invincible. If the quality of his opponent's sword was higher than his, then he wouldn't be able to devour it. If it was of the same cultivation, then he only had a 50% chance of devouring it. After all, there was a difference in strength even amongst the same cultivation. In any case, so long as it was a sword weaker than his spirit beauty sword, then he could devour it. This was the heaven-defying aspect of his cultivation technique. As soon as the black sword in front of Yi Xian entered Yi Xian's body, it directly transformed into boundless energy that was absorbed by Yi Xian's body. When he noticed this scene, the expression of the black-robed man in front of Yi Xian changed drastically. How could this be possible? He was just about to retreat when Yi Xian suddenly clenched his fists tightly, and then he suddenly smashed them onto the fatal spots on both sides of the black-robed man's head. Bang! The black-robed man's head exploded with a bang. Yi Xian flashed backwards, whereas the spirit beauty sword had already firmly held onto Yi Ling who'd fallen earlier. Yi Xian's eyes closed slowly. At this moment, his body was trembling slightly. He was about to break through. A sword at the bright rank could withstand at least 10 supreme-grade spiritual swords. However, Yi Xian didn't choose to break through, and he forcefully suppressed it instead. Breaking through at this moment was undoubtedly courting death. He floated over to Yi Ling's side, and he carried Yi Ling to the ground before taking out a gold sore pill for Yi Ling to consume. After a while, Yi Ling's complexion gradually improved, and a short moment later, Yi Ling opened her eyes slowly. When she saw Yi Xian, Yi Ling's tears flowed down, and she just looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian rubbed Yi Ling's little head lightly. "Brother will bring you home." As soon as he finished speaking, he pulled Yi Ling's hand and walked towards the distance. Just at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. Opposite him was the black-robed man who'd fought him at the beginning. The man's black clothes had already been torn, and he wore silver soft armor. Earlier, in order to save Yi Ling, Yi Xian didn't pursue the man, and the man didn't flee. On the left of the silver-robed man was the longbow man who'd launched a sneak attack, and on the right of the longbow man was a fat man who'd carried 2 extremely large black axes in his hands. This fat man had just appeared. Xueqi walked to Yi Xian's side. He glanced at the 3 people in the distance. "Be careful of the person in the dark. That person was probably testing us before, and he's not the real one." Yi Xian nodded. Of course he would be careful. Because up until now, he had not sensed the person who had attacked him secretly. He should be an assassin. Yi Xian looked at Xueqi. "If there's a chance later, we'll take the girl away. I'm afraid these people will target her so that we won't be able to do anything." Yi Ling glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Xueqi glanced at Yi Ling. He hesitated for a moment and then nodded. With Yi Ling around, those people would definitely target her. She would be in the most danger if she stayed here. However, if he took her away, Yi Xian would have to fight a group of people alone. Yi Xian's situation would become very bad. At this moment, the silver-armored man in the lead suddenly swept his gaze over the surroundings. This person's strength is so great that he's definitely not someone we can fight alone. If we don't join forces, I'm afraid the cooked duck will fly away. After a moment of silence, 6 or 7 people suddenly appeared and stood behind the silver-armored man. These 6 or 7 people were all at the peak of the levitation realm, and one of them was even at the nether passage realm. None of them were weak. Besiege? How shameless! Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded. Everyone looked over towards the source of the voice. A man stood on a rock on the right. The man wore linen clothes, had a blade of grass in his mouth, and held a blade that was wrapped in cloth in his hand. He was looking at the silver-armored man's group, and his eyes were filled with undisguised disdain. The silver-armored man glanced at the man in linen clothes. "Who are you?" The man in linen clothes glanced at the silver-armored man with disdain. "I'm your father." The silver-armored man's expression instantly became ferocious. In the next moment, his right leg suddenly swept horizontally towards the man in linen clothes from afar. Hiss! An image of a leg flashed up straight towards the man in linen clothes. The man in linen clothes glanced coldly at the silver-armored man. He spat out the blade of grass in his mouth, and then the blade that was wrapped in cloth in his hand suddenly flew out. Bang! The image of the leg exploded into pieces. However, the cloth blade didn't stop, and it shot straight towards the silver-armored man at an extremely swift speed. The silver-armored man's pupils constricted slightly, and then his figure suddenly became illusory. In the next moment, numerous afterimages enveloped the cloth blade. Bang! An explosion resounded, and then everyone watched as the silver-armored man was blasted over 30 m away. When he finally stopped, his right leg was trembling. At this moment, everyone had shock in their eyes. The silver-armored man stared fixedly at the man in linen clothes. The man in linen clothes didn't continue attacking. He gestured with his right hand, and the cloth-wrapped blade flew back into his grasp. After that, he gazed at Yi Xian who stood nearby. A straightforward person doesn't resort to insinuations. I, Zhen Xiaowang, have come to take your head. However, I disdain ganging up on you. Fight them, and I'll fight you one-on-one if you win. If you lose, I'll avenge you. As he spoke, he sized up Yi Xian. You're an opponent worthy of respect. Mo Yunqi, who stood by Yi Xian's side, gave Zhen Xiaowang a thumbs up. You're a man. Don't worry, I'll take care of your funeral once you're killed by Bandit Yi. Zhen Xiaowang glanced at Mo Yunqi. Don't worry, I'll kill you as well after I kill him. Right, that won't do. Your head isn't worth much, so I don't want to make a losing deal like that. Mo Yunqi was speechless. Suddenly, roaring laughter resounded from afar. Ha ha! How lively! As soon as this voice resounded, a figure flashed over at an extremely swift speed and arrived before them in the blink of an eye. It was a young man around the age of 20. He had slanted brows, starry eyes, and an imposing appearance. Moreover, he held a string of black pearls in his hand. Zhen Xiaowang glanced at the young man, and his gaze stopped on the string of black pearls in the young man's hand. Gong Ching Ching. There was a trace of surprise in the young man's eyes when he heard that, and he glanced at Zhen Xiaowang before he smiled lightly. So it's Zhen Xiaowang from the Zhen clan who cultivated the saber instead of the sword. I never expected that you'd come as well. Zhen Xiaowang spoke indifferently. It's none of your business whether I'm here or not. You old ghost, you only know how to scheme all day long. Gong Qingqing wasn't angry, and he just smiled before he looked at Yi Xian who stood nearby. Does this say? I truly never expected that a tiny country like Zhang wouldn't just have an Lanqiu. There's also a monster like you. How rare. Yi Xian glanced at Gong Qingqing. Do you want to fight? Gong Qingqing shook his head. Isn't fighting boring? As he spoke, he grinned. I like to invest. Yi Xian, you came to this secret realm to save your younger sister, Yi Ling. How about this? I'll protect your younger sister today. And if you survive today, you must help me with 3 things in the future. Don't worry. It won't be something that will put you in a difficult position. Yi Xian glanced at Gong Qingqing. Deal. He naturally wouldn't refuse. His younger sister's safety was the most important. Gong Qingqing gave Yi Xian a thumbs up. How straightforward. As he spoke, he moved aside and glanced at the others. Everyone, all of you seek wealth and I seek favors. It's all the same. Please give me some face and don't touch this little girl. Who the hell do you think you are? Meanwhile, a man by the silver-armored man's side ridiculed. Do you really think we'll do what you say? Gong Qingqing glanced at the man who spoke, and then a black pearl suddenly flew out from his palm. Bang! Without any warning, the body of the man who spoke exploded with a loud bang. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed. A nether passage realm expert. There was fear in the silver-armored man's eyes as he gazed at Gong Qingqing. Gong Qingqing glanced at the others here. Genius? Monster? Allow me to be frank, but what kind of monstrous genius are you if you don't make it to the martial rankings? As he spoke, he moved back to stand by Yi Ling's side, and then he sized up Yi Ling. Yi Ling raised her head to look at him. All of them want Big Brother's head, so why are you helping Big Brother? Gong Qingqing grinned. Even though your Big Brother's head is valuable, it's just an external possession. If your Big Brother becomes very, very strong in the future, then I'll benefit greatly. Understand? Yi Ling thought for a moment, and then she nodded. Big Brother owes you a favor, so I owe you a favor as well. If you encounter any difficulties in the future, Then I'll help you just like Big Brother. She spoke in a very serious manner. Gong Qingqing smiled and didn't say anything. Actually, he didn't know that this little girl was his greatest gain today. Meanwhile, Yi Xian walked slowly towards the silver-armored man's group. The silver-armored man and the others instantly became vigilant when they witnessed this scene. Yi Xian pointed at his head. The best head is right here. What are all of you waiting for? The silver-armored man suddenly laughed savagely. I'm coming to take it right now. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged directly at Yi Xian. On the other hand, the others around him followed closely behind and charged at Yi Xian as well. Over 10 people. All of them were top-rate geniuses. The silver-armored man and the others were naturally unafraid because they would definitely be unable to defeat Yi Xian in a one-on-one battle. But now they had the advantage in numbers. It was difficult for 2 fists to fight 4 hands. All of them weren't weak, so it was simply impossible for Yi Xian to fight over 10 of them by himself. I'm coming. Meanwhile, a furious shout suddenly resounded from afar. Mo Yunqi raised his head and looked over. It was Bai Zhe. Mo Yunqi was instantly infuriated when he saw Bai Zhe. Motherfucker! Are you fucking lost? You're only here now? Bai Zhe laughed embarrassedly. I ran in the wrong direction. Mo Yunqi was speechless. Bai Zhe's speed was extremely fast. He barged his way through and crashed into anyone he encountered. After he sent a man flying, no one dared to block him. Just like that, he successfully charged to the front of Yi Xian. Bai Zhe grinned. I'm late. Yi Xian shook his head. Just in time. With that said, he looked at the silver-armored man and the others that were charging over. How many do you want to fight? Bai Zhe thought for a moment and raised a finger. Yi Xian nodded and patted his shoulder. You have guts. All right, pick 10. Bai Zhe was dumbfounded. At this moment, Jian Xiaowang and Gong Qingqing suddenly turned their heads to look at a withered tree on their right. On the withered tree stood a man with his hands behind his back. Seeing this man, both of them frowned at the same time. Jian Xiaowang retracted his gaze and said softly, This guy actually came as well. Gong Qingqing pondered slightly. Are we going to lose money? Outside the mystic realm, somewhere, Li Xuanzong suddenly laughed maniacally. Haha, he actually came. Haha. Chapter 94. On the other side, a man in black suddenly ran to a boulder and knelt on one knee. Your Majesty, I found the person sent by Great Cloud Empire's Xueqi College. On the boulder, Tuoba Yen said calmly, Who is it? The man in black said solemnly, Gonsha-san. Tuoba Yen frowned when he heard that. Behind Tuoba Yen, the old man and the old woman exchanged looks with a trace of shock in their eyes. Gonsha-san. This person was naturally very famous. Because he was a monster on the martial rankings, and he was ranked at the 11th position. 11th. This was already a very terrifying ranking. After all, there were so many people in Azure Prefecture. To be ranked 11th among so many monster geniuses, it was not an exaggeration to say that it was 1 in a million. And this was not the reason why he was famous. The real reason why he was famous in Azure Prefecture was because he fought against a divine combination realm expert in the air. A draw. A draw against a divine combination realm expert in the air. And that was half a year ago. On the boulder, Tuoba Yen glanced at the secret realm entrance. Does he have a chance of winning? Behind Tuoba Yen, the old man shook his head. Unless he has a trump card. Tuoba Yan's expression was calm and he did not speak. On the other side, on the treetops, Zhang Yuetian said solemnly, Gonsha-san. The 9th floor master nodded. I know. Zhang Yuetian looked at the 9th floor master. You are very calm. The 9th floor master glanced at Zhang Yuetian. Don't panic. Let us quietly watch Xueqi College court death. Zhang Yuetian. Inside the secret realm, Yi Xian's group was already fighting with the silver-armored man's group. 3 against more than a dozen people. In terms of numbers, Yi Xian's side did not have any advantage. As soon as they clashed, Yi Xian's side was completely suppressed and at a disadvantage. Yi Xian's opponent was the silver-armored man. On his left and right were a fat man wielding 2 axes and a man wielding a spear. Apart from these 3, there was also a sneak attack from time to time. There was already an arrow on Yi Xian's shoulder. Not only Yi Xian, but Mo Yunqi and Bai Zai also had arrows. Sneak attacks are hard to guard against. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked at Bai Zai in the distance. "Big guy, block it for me." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure floated out, and his target was the longbow-wielding man who was over 30 meters away. If the longbowman didn't kill them, the three of them would be killed by the longbowman's arrows. Seeing that Yi Xian's target was the longbow-wielding man, the silver-armored man's expression changed. "Stop him." As soon as his voice fell, he directly rushed out, and the fat man beside him suddenly grabbed a giant axe and threw it at Yi Xian. Chi! The giant axe sliced through the air, instantly producing a sharp, ear-piercing sound of breaking wind. On the other side, Bai Zai suddenly slammed his hands on the ground. Boom! The earth cracked. His whole body collided with the giant axe. Bang! The giant axe was instantly knocked away by Bai Zai, but there was a bloody wound on his chest. His physical body was similar to Yi Xian's. They were both extremely strong, but they weren't invincible. After knocking away the giant axe, Bai Zai wiped off the blood on his chest, then directly rushed towards the silver-armored man and the others. But in the next moment, his whole body was directly sent flying. Without the restriction of the axe, Yi Xian had already rushed in front of the longbow-wielding man. As soon as he arrived, 3 arrows were connected from head to tail and aimed straight at the center of Yi Xian's brows. The arrows were very fast and very powerful. A savage smile appeared on the corners of Yi Xian's mouth, and he suddenly slashed forward with a spirit-elegant sword in both hands. Chi! The sword fell, and the 3 arrows shattered with a bang. The longbow-wielding man was about to retreat when the spirit-elegant sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly flew out. Chi! The longbow-wielding man had just floated half a step when his head was sent flying. Blood spurted out like a fountain. After the longbow-wielding man was sent flying, the spirit-elegant sword suddenly slashed downwards. Below, the silver-armored man and the others who were about to pursue Bai Zai suddenly had a change of expression. They raised their heads and saw a sword slashing straight at them like a bolt of lightning from the heavens. Not daring to be careless, the fat man beside the silver-armored man suddenly slashed forward with a giant axe. With this slash, the axe instantly tore through the air with a sharp explosion. At the same time, the axe directly struck the tip of the spirit-elegant sword. Bang! The giant axe and the spirit-elegant sword shook violently, and in the next moment, the giant axe directly cracked and shattered. The spirit-elegant sword paused for a moment, then the sword pierced straight at the fat man. The fat man's pupils constricted, and his eyes were filled with horror. At this moment, a leg suddenly kicked the spirit-elegant sword. Bang! The spirit-elegant sword was kicked askew and changed its direction. At this moment, a figure descended from the sky and smashed a fist towards the fat man. This figure was Yi Xian, who had just descended. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through the fat man's eyes. He didn't dodge, and he similarly smashed his fist towards Yi Xian instead. The silver-armored man was horrified when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly said, "Watch out!" As soon as he finished speaking. Crack! The sound of bones breaking resounded abruptly, and then the fat man's entire arm exploded apart, causing blood and flesh to spray into the surroundings. The fat man was horrified in his heart, and he was just about to retreat explosively when a flying sword suddenly pierced through the center of his forehead. Hiss! A strand of fresh blood sprayed out from the back of the fat man's head. On the other hand, the fat man's figure stiffened completely, and then he fell to the ground. At the moment the flying sword entered the center of the fat man's forehead, a spear suddenly arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly pressed his palms together and held the spear together. A wisp of a ferocious expression arose on the corners of the man's mouth, and then he suddenly spun the spear forward. Hiss! The tip of the spear directly pierced half an inch into Yi Xian's chest. At the same time, a leg suddenly swept towards Yang Ye's head. He was attacked from both front and back. Yi Xian didn't dare act carelessly. He tapped his right foot lightly on the ground and was just about to activate the armor of earth. However, right at this moment, an afterimage suddenly appeared by his side, and then a ray of cold light slashed towards that leg at an extremely swift speed. Bang! The silver-armored man was blasted over 10 m back. He stared fixedly at a woman who'd appeared by Yi Xian's side. It was Jianji. Jianji glanced at Yi Xian with a rather unnatural expression on her face. You ate too much. As she spoke, she suddenly stretched out her right hand that was hidden behind her back towards Yi Xian, and there was a golden chicken drumstick in her hand. For you. Yi Xian was speechless. When Ji Anji saw that Yi Xian hadn't taken it, she immediately took a bite, and then she turned around to gaze at Mo Yunqi. At this moment, Mo Yunqi was flashing about repeatedly, and he was in a very sorry state. Ji Anji spoke softly. I'll go help him. As soon as she finished speaking, her figure vanished on the spot. Yi Xian glanced at Ji Anji who was gnawing on the drumstick, and then he shook his head and sighed. What a glutton. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around to gaze at the silver-armored man. Die! As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward. On the other side, Jian Shaowang who sat on a rock glanced at Yi Xian. That fellow is really good at fighting. Gong Qingqing smiled as he stood not too far away from Jian Shaowang. Indeed. I just wonder if he has any trump cards. As he spoke, he glanced at the man who stood on a log that was over 100 m away. The man just stood there and had no intention to attack. Jian Shaowang glanced at the man on the log and did not say anything. By Gong Qingqing's side, Yiling looked at Yi Xian's group of 4 who were being besieged. Her fists were clenched tightly, and her expression was icy cold. No one knew what she was thinking. In the distance, Yi Xian's speed was extremely swift, and he instantly arrived before the silver-armored man. At this moment, the silver-armored man retreated repeatedly, and at the same time, he kicked repeatedly with his right leg. Every single kick would cause a sharp gust of wind to slash at Yi Xian. However, the gust of wind couldn't stop Yi Xian. Every time Yi Xian swung the exquisite sword in his hand, it would easily slash apart the gust of wind. When he was still 6 m away from the silver-armored man, the exquisite sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly transformed into a ray of sword light that shot out. A flying sword. The silver-armored man's expression changed drastically when he saw this scene. At this moment, a spear suddenly shot over from the right, and the spear stabbed the body of the exquisite sword. Bang! The exquisite sword was forced to a stop. Yi Xian turned around, and on his right was the spear-wielding man who attacked him earlier. Yi Xian waved his right hand, and the exquisite sword flew back into his hand. In the next moment, he stomped his right foot on the ground. Bang! The ground cracked. On the other hand, he made use of the force from the ground to vanish on the spot with a swish. In the distance, the spear-wielding man's pupils constricted. He didn't dodge, and he stabbed his spear forward instead. With this stab, a sharp spear aura instantly enveloped Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. A single strike to decide life and death. Hum! A sword hum tore through the battlefield. In the blink of an eye. Hiss! The spear in the spear-wielding man's hand split from the middle, and Yi Xian was already over 10 m behind the spear-wielding man. The spear-wielding man looked towards the distance in a daze. What a powerful strike! As soon as he finished speaking, the space between his brows split open, and a strand of blood sprayed out. Yi Xian turned around to look at the nearby silver-armored man, and the silver-armored man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. I'll withdraw. Withdraw. At this moment, he was slightly afraid. Not only did Yi Xian have help, his own strength was even stronger than he'd imagined. The joint attack of the 3 of them was actually unable to do anything to Yi Xian. Now that he was all alone, and he was extremely exhausted and even injured, he naturally had to choose to withdraw at this moment. Withdraw? Yi Xian glanced indifferently at the silver-armored man. Isn't it too late? The silver-armored man said coldly, Yi Xian, I'm the 3rd prince of the Chu kingdom. If you kill me, then my Chu kingdom's imperial family will definitely not let you off. You! Right at this moment, a flying sword flashed through the battlefield. Hiss! A sword directly pierced through the center of the silver-armored man's brows. The silver-armored man's figure stiffened, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Yi Xian walked over to the silver-armored man, and then he glanced at the silver-armored man. The imperial family of the Chu kingdom? Fuck the imperial family of the Chu kingdom. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slashed horizontally with his sword. Hiss! The silver-armored man's head instantly flew into the air. Blood sprayed out like a fountain. Many readers have asked me why I've been updating at midnight lately. I'll answer them. The times are changing. If I were to update twice a day like I did back when I was in the sword domain, then I would definitely be abandoned by the readers. I must change. Change myself. I want to pursue something. I want to break through. Actually, all of that is nonsense. The true reason is that I'm building a house for a poor family, and I want to earn more money. Chapter 95. Yi Xian walked in front of the silver-armored man's corpse. With a wave of his right hand, the silver armor on the silver-armored man flew into his hand. At the same time, the ring on the silver-armored man's finger flew into his hand as well. Without looking closely, he threw the two items into the prison pagoda. Then, he turned to look at Mo Yunqi and the other two who were surrounded. He was about to make a move. But at this moment, the man on the log suddenly disappeared several dozen feet away. Yi Xian suddenly turned around. At this moment, the man had already appeared in front of him. The man pointed at the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows with his fingers. Extremely fast. Yi Xian held his sword and made a vertical slash. Just as the sword was about to cut the man's fingers, two of the man's fingers suddenly separated and clamped. With this clamp, he forcefully caught Yi Xian's sword. The man's fingers trembled lightly. Bang! Yi Xian and his sword were sent flying dozens of feet away. The moment he stopped, the man suddenly leaped in front of Yi Xian and slammed his palm towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian stepped back with his left foot. Then, he raised his sword and stabbed forward. This stab stabbed directly into the man's palm. The moment the sword technique came into contact with the man's palm, the man's hand suddenly dodged the sword at a strange angle. Then, his palm moved down along the Lingxiu sword and slammed onto Yi Xian's chest. Bang! Yi Xian instantly retreated 50 to 60 feet. The moment he stopped, a smear of blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. As soon as he stopped, a black shadow quietly emerged from the shadow behind him. The next second, a beam of cold light pierced into Yi Xian's back. Chi! A stream of blood splattered out from Yi Xian's back. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly turned around and slashed down with his sword. Bang! An afterimage was sent flying, but very quickly, the afterimage disappeared silently. The moment the afterimage disappeared, Yi Xian's pupils abruptly constricted, and the Lingxiu sword in his hand suddenly flew backward. Behind Yi Xian, who was his shadow, another person had appeared out of nowhere. Bang! Chi! Yi Xian retreated rapidly, and at his abdomen, a wound had opened up unknowingly, and fresh blood was flowing out. In the distance, beside Gongshi-san, a black shadow appeared and disappeared from time to time. The one who attacked repeatedly just now was this black shadow. That guy is from Dark World. At this time, not far behind Yi Xian, Jian Shaowang suddenly said, "These fellows are all assassins, very disgusting." Yi Xian wiped his abdomen. His palm was instantly dyed red. Yi Xian's face sank when he witnessed this scene, and he raised his head to look at the two figures in the distance. But right at this moment, both of them vanished at the same time. There was enmity between the two of them. They were not on the same side. They had obviously attacked because they wanted to take Yi Xian's head first. Yi Xian bit the Lingxiu sword in his mouth and tore off his clothes to wrap around his abdomen. At this moment, both of them had arrived before him. Yi Xian held the Lingxiu sword and was about to attack when a cold gleam suddenly slashed from Yi Xian's right. The cold gleam wasn't targeted at him, but at the two people in front of him. Bang! The shadow in front of Yi Xian was forced to stop by the cold gleam, and Gongshi-san stopped as well. At this moment, a beautiful figure appeared beside Yi Xian. Yi Xian was instantly stunned when he saw who it was. Ninth Princess, Zhang Jiu. Yi Xian looked at Zhang Jiu in astonishment. "Little Jiu, why are you here?" Zhang Jiu glanced at Yi Xian indifferently. "Can't I come?" Yi Xian shook his head and was about to say something when Zhang Jiu suddenly said, "Cut the crap and hurry up and fight." As soon as she finished speaking, she charged towards the shadow. Moreover, the shadow suddenly vanished, and it was behind Zhang Jiu when it appeared again. Zhang Jiu's reaction was extremely swift, and she turned around and slashed repeatedly. Bang! 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 Numerous explosions resounded incessantly. Yi Xian was relieved when he saw Zhang Jiu had the strength to fight the shadow. He turned around to look at Gongshi-san, and he didn't waste his breath at all. He suddenly vanished on the spot. OM! A sword howl tore through the surroundings. Gongshi-san's face was emotionless. He tapped his right foot lightly, and then he vanished on the spot. Bang! Along with a huge bang, Yi Xian and Gong Shan returned to their original positions. The sword in Yi Xian's hand was trembling violently, and a wisp of blood was slowly seeping out from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. Gong Shan glanced at his palm, and there was a trace of blood at the center of his palm. A trace of seriousness appeared in Gong Shan's eyes as he gazed at the blood. Because Yi Xian was only at the Ascension realm, and it was a realm lower than him. He himself was someone who could surmount his realm to do battle, yet now, someone was actually capable of surmounting his realm to do so. Gong Shan raised his head to look at Yi Xian who stood nearby. No wonder they paid such a price to eliminate you. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure suddenly vanished on the spot. An afterimage flashed in the surroundings. In the distance, Yi Xian's pupils constricted slightly. In the next moment, he held Spirit Grace with both hands and swiftly slashed forward. A dazzling ray of light surged out from within Spirit Grace. Meanwhile, Gong Shan's finger tapped the tip of Spirit Grace. A moment of silence ensued. Bang! Spirit Grace shook violently, and then Yi Xian was blasted backward explosively. However, Gong Shan actually didn't take even half a step back. Gong Shan suddenly soared into the sky, and in the next moment, he slowly closed his eyes. In an instant, his entire right arm shook violently as a powerful force converged towards his arm from all directions. In midair, Gong Shan pointed diagonally towards the ground, and a strand of cold light suddenly appeared on his fingertip. Heaven rank martial technique. Watch out! Right at this moment, Jiang Jiu's voice suddenly resounded from afar. Heaven rank martial technique. Yi Xian raised his head to look at Gong Shan. This was the first time he'd seen a heaven rank martial technique. In midair, a shapeless pressure pressed down towards him like tide water. Merely this aura was suffocating. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. He knew that the person before him was about to reveal his trump card. He couldn't continue hiding it. Yi Xian opened his palm, and Spirit Grace silently appeared. In next to no time, Spirit Grace started trembling violently, and numerous sword howls resounded incessantly from within it. In the distance, Jian Shaowang stared fixedly at Yi Xian who stood nearby. This fellow still has a trump card. Gong Qingqing grinned. What a joke! How could an ordinary person catch the eye of an Lanxiu? Jian Shaowang gazed at Gong Qingqing. What's her ranking on the martial rankings now? Gong Qingqing spoke indifferently. When she left the Great Cloud Empire, she defeated that fellow who was ranked third on the martial rankings with 3 moves. The corners of Jian Shaowang's mouth twitched. That woman! Yiling stared fixedly at Yi Xian who stood in the distance, and she clenched her fists tightly. Besides deep worry, there was also indifference and rage in her eyes. Meanwhile, Jian Shaowang and Gong Qingqing suddenly turned to look at Gong Shan and Yi Xian who stood nearby. In midair, Gong Shan suddenly opened his eyes, and in the next moment, he suddenly pointed at Yi Xian, finger of heaven and earth. As soon as his finger descended, a strand of overbearing energy suddenly surged out from the tip of Gong Shan's finger. At the same time, an enormous illusory finger that was over 30 m long descended forcefully towards Yi Xian. Moreover, this enormous energy contained an extremely formidable force. It was like a volcano that had been accumulating strength for over 1,000 years had suddenly erupted. Not only was it extremely overbearing, but it even caused the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet to collapse inch by inch. On the other hand, some of the cultivators that were comparatively closer to Yi Xian and Gong Shan were instantly blasted flying by the might of this force. The might of a single finger was so terrifying. As the target of that force, Yi Xian's breathing had stopped at this moment. He couldn't breathe at all. A heaven-rank martial technique contained the might of the heavens and the earth. Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. In the next moment, the sword in his hand shook violently, and then it instantly transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky. The sword contained a peerlessly overbearing aura, and it wasn't just that, it even emanated a strand of sword intent. Sword intent. Seeing this, Jian Shaowang suddenly stood up and stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Sword intent. This sword intent is so faint that it doesn't seem to exist at all. What kind of sword intent is this? Beside Jian Shaowang, Gong Qingqing looked at Yi Xian from afar with a smile. He isn't the great swordsman at all, but a sword Dao grandmaster. A sword Dao grandmaster who isn't even 20 years old is rare even in the Great Cloud Empire. In the distance, Yi Xian's spirit elegant sword shot into the sky. This sword emitted boundless sword aura and sword ray. This sword pierced through the sky. In the sky, when the sword pierced the enormous illusory finger, boom! A deafening explosion suddenly resounded in the sky. In the next moment, the enormous finger shattered with a loud bang, and countless energy fragments and sword rays shot out in all directions. In the surroundings, the people who were besieging Mo Yunqi and the other two retreated rapidly to avoid the energy fragments and sword rays. In the sky, when Spirit Elegant's sword pierced through the enormous illusory finger, it pierced through and arrived in front of Gongshi-san. Gongshi-san narrowed his eyes. He stretched out his hand and clasped Spirit Elegant's sword again. But at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared behind the Lingxiu sword. He grabbed the Lingxiu sword and then spun it forward. A sword to determine life and death. This sword contained sword intent, a sword to determine life and death. When this sword was unleashed, two of Gongshi-san's fingers were severed, and in the blink of an eye, the sword pierced towards Gongshi-san's chest. At this moment, Gongshi-san mysteriously vanished on the spot, and when he reappeared, he was already over 30 meters away. Teleportation. However, as soon as Gongshi-san stopped, a trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Not only that, but his face instantly turned pale. Obviously, he had paid a terrible price for that teleportation just now. Yi Xian looked at Gongshi-san, who was in the distance. He was about to attack again when a white-robed elder suddenly appeared in front of Gongshi-san. The white-robed elder looked coldly at Yi Xian. Scram! At this moment, an elder suddenly appeared above Yi Xian's head. It was Old Man Ji. Old Man Ji gulped down a mouthful of wine and was about to speak when Yi Xian had already charged towards Gongshi-san. Old Man Ji. In the distance, the white-robed elder narrowed his eyes, and the killing intent in his eyes was almost tangible. You're courting death. As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to attack. But at this moment, a powerful pressure enveloped him. The white-robed elder was shocked. He turned to look at Old Man Ji and said in astonishment, Peak of Myriad Technique Realm. Bang! At this moment, a muffled sound came from afar. The white-robed elder suddenly turned to look. Gongshi-san had just crashed to the ground, and at this moment, Yi Xian descended in front of Gongshi-san and pressed his sword against the space between Gongshi-san's brows. The white-robed elder stared fixedly at Yi Xian. If you touch him in the slightest, my Akagami Academy will. Right at this moment, Yi Xian held his sword and slashed horizontally. Gongshi-san's head instantly flew into the air. Yi Xian kicked Gongshi-san's head. Bang! The bloody head instantly exploded. The sword was withdrawn. Chapter 96. Let Gongshi-san go? Yi Xian had never thought of that. These people were used to being superior. If he let Gongshi-san go, not only would they not be grateful, but they would also think it was what he should do. Moreover, if he let Gongshi-san go, it was very likely that Gongshi-san would continue to seek revenge after he went back to cultivate. Naturally, he would not do such a stupid thing. Moreover, he would never place his hopes of survival on someone else. Since you came to mess with me, then I will naturally kill you. I don't care who's behind you. I'll kill you first. Seeing that Yi Xian killed Gongshi-san, the white-robed old man's face suddenly turned extremely ugly. He stared at Yi Xian as if he wanted to eat Yi Xian alive. Gongshi-san. He was the top genius of the inner court of Great Cloud Empire's Karaki College. The entire Karaki College had high hopes for him. Moreover, Gongshi-san was his student, which was equivalent to his personal disciple. But now, he was killed by Yi Xian in front of him. The white-robed old man was about to make a move when Old Ji suddenly punched the white-robed old man from afar. The punch was firm and fierce. The space around the white-robed old man twisted, and in the next moment, bang! The white-robed old man was sent flying dozens of feet away. The white-robed old man wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked up at the drunken Old Ji not far away with a trace of disbelief in his eyes. Although he was not at the peak of the Dharma realm, he was still in the Dharma realm. However, he was almost powerless in front of Old Ji. He could not beat him at all. The white-robed old man finally came to this conclusion. However, he was not afraid at all because behind him was the Karaki College of Great Cloud Empire. Although Karaki Academy wasn't the headquarters of Great Cloud Empire, it was the best academy in Qingzhou province and one of the most powerful forces in Qingzhou province. He was confident. It should be said that he was very confident. The white-robed old man glanced coldly at old Ji. Just you wait. With that, he turned to look at Yi Xian not far away. You bastard, let's see who can protect you in the future. After speaking, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. Old man Ji glanced at the place where the white-robed old man disappeared with a calm expression and did not say anything. He glanced at Yi Xian below. Don't hurt yourself. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure trembled and he disappeared on the spot. After old man Ji left, Yi Xian turned to look at Zhang Jiu, who wasn't too far away. Zhang Jiu's face had a deep knife wound, and her abdomen had been dyed red with blood. Yi Xian tightened his grip on the spirit elegance sword in his right hand. He looked opposite Zhang Jiu. There, a ghostly shadow suddenly floated backward. You want to run? Seeing this, Yi Xian suddenly roared, Die! As soon as he finished speaking, his entire body floated out. At the same time, the exquisite sword in his hand suddenly slashed out. The speed of the exquisite sword was extremely fast, and it arrived before the ghostly figure in the blink of an eye. The ghostly figure suddenly disappeared on the spot, and the exquisite sword missed. At this moment, the shadow behind Yi Xian suddenly wriggled, and in the blink of an eye, a cold gleam was aimed at the back of Yi Xian's neck. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. His reaction was extremely fast, and his body leaned forward, dodging the cold gleam. At the same time, the exquisite sword suddenly flew over from afar. Behind Yi Xian, the ghostly figure quietly disappeared and floated backward. At this moment, a golden flying knife suddenly appeared behind the ghostly figure without any warning. The ghostly figure's figure trembled, and it immediately became illusory. When it appeared again, it was already over 100 feet to the right. Seeing this scene, the expressions of Yi Xian and the rest turned solemn. What a strange movement technique. Mo Yunqi also had a solemn expression. His speed was fast, but he was not a ghostly figure. However, the person in front of him was not only fast, but also incomparably ghostly, just like a real ghostly figure. The ghostly figure's body gradually became illusory. Obviously, it wanted to escape. At this moment, the nearby exquisite sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly flew out. This strike was infused with sword intent. This sword was incomparably fast. In the distance, the ghostly figure suddenly stopped, and the dagger in his hand pressed firmly against Yi Xian's exquisite sword. As for himself, he was pushed back explosively by the force contained within the sword. Seeing this scene, the corners of Mo Yunqi's mouth curled up slightly. In the next moment, his figure trembled, and he vanished on the spot. At the same time, two cold gleams silently appeared on the left and right of the ghostly figure. Flying knives. The ghostly figure wielded a dagger and slashed repeatedly. Bang! The two flying knives were instantly slashed away. At this moment, a strand of sword light suddenly pierced through the middle of the ghostly figure's body. Hiss! The ghostly figure's body directly stiffened on the spot. In the next moment, the ghostly figure's body gradually became illusory. At this moment, a drop of blood suddenly flew into Yi Xian's chest from the ghostly figure's illusory body. Yi Xian looked at his chest, and there was a red on his chest. This is... Yi Xian frowned. Nearby, Jian Shaowang suddenly said, The Blood Soul Hunting Order is a life and death mark of the Dark World. From now on, you are the mortal enemy of the Dark World, and there will be countless assassins coming to kill you. Yi Xian nodded. You're here for revenge, right? Jian Shaowang glanced at Yi Xian. Perhaps you don't know how terrifying the Dark World is. You won't be able to handle it. Yi Xian spread out his hands. Then what should I do? If he wants to kill me, do I have to be killed by him? Jian Shaowang, Yi Xian shook his head. They want to kill me, I kill them, and then they will come to take revenge on me. It's so damn hard to be a human. As he spoke, he turned and looked towards the distance. There were 8 or 9 people there, and they were the people who had besieged Mo Yunqi and the others. When they saw Yi Xian look over, their expressions changed drastically, and they were about to flee. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, Fucking kill them all. Since we have enough enemies, let's make more. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged out. Mo Yunqi and the others followed closely behind him. Mo Yunqi and the others were really angry because they had almost died a few times just now. Without the silver-armored man, San, and the assassin from the dark world. Although the remaining people were monstrous geniuses, they weren't a match for Yi Xian and the others. Slaughter. Jian Shaowang glanced at Yi Xian and the others. This fellow is going to offend all the powers. Gong Qingqing spoke indifferently. Even if he doesn't kill them, he will still offend them. To put it simply, if the people behind him are weak, then the powers behind them will be his enemies. If he is strong, then not only will the powers behind them not dare to do anything, they will even apologize to him obediently. As he spoke, he glanced at Jian Shaowang. For example, if he has the Jian family as his backing, then would these people dare to take revenge on him? Jian Shaowang spoke coldly. I know what you're going to say. Don't worry, I will fight him one-on-one. If I really can't win, then I'll flee. I won't fight to the death. Gong Qingqing smiled lightly. I just don't want you to be used by others. Jian Shaowang glanced at the sky and didn't speak. He wasn't stupid, and he naturally knew that this was a trap set up by someone against Yi Xian. However, since they were already here, it wouldn't make sense for them to leave without a fight. In the distance, the battle was coming to an end. A few breaths of time later, only a man remained before Yi Xian and the others. The man's right arm had been chopped off, but he didn't flee because he couldn't. He wasn't as fast as Yi Xian's sword, and he wasn't as fast as Mo Yunqi. The one-armed man stared at Yi Xian, who was not far away. Do you know who you killed? Yi Xian shook his head. The one-armed man laughed sinisterly. You killed people from the famous forces in Qingzhou. Now that you've killed them, those forces won't let you off. Don't worry, I'll wait for you down there. You. Qi. A sword suddenly pierced through the one-armed man's forehead. The one-armed man's body stiffened. Yi Xian walked in front of the one-armed man. You talk too much nonsense. As he spoke, he pulled out the spirit-elegant sword. Qi. Blood spurted out from the one-armed man's forehead. Yi Xian held the Lingxiu sword in his hand as he turned around and walked towards Mo Yunqi and the rest. Mo Yunqi and the rest had injuries of various sizes on their bodies. Especially Bai Zai. There were too many injuries on his body, and there was even a deep wound on his chest. Even the bones inside could be seen clearly. Apart from that, his right arm was directly dislocated from his shoulder. His injuries were very serious. Yi Xian walked in front of Bai Zai and took out his golden sore pill. At this moment Bai Zai shook his head. No need. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Bai Zai explained, I cultivate my physical body, so I need to be beaten. The more I get beaten, the stronger my body will be in the future. Not far away, Mo Yunqi chuckled. Beaten? I can help you then. Bai Zai glared at Mo Yunqi, and the latter hurriedly took 2 steps back. At this moment, Yi Xian took out the silver armor that he had used to kill the silver-armored man. This silver armor was a low-grade light-rank armor. Although it was cracked by his sword, if it was repaired, it could be said to be invaluable. Yi Xian handed the silver armor to Bai Zai. This thing is not bad. You can keep it to protect yourself. Bai Zai could naturally see the value of this silver armor. He smiled bitterly. If I wear this, then what's the point of cultivating my physical body? I really don't need it. I'll use it. At this moment, Mo Yunqi suddenly took the silver armor from Yi Xian. I don't cultivate my physical body, I can use it. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and smiled wickedly. Brother Yi, give this to me. I'm afraid of death, I'm really afraid of death. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. All right, I'll give it to you. He originally wanted to give this silver armor to Mo Yunqi because Mo Yunqi's close combat ability was too weak. If someone got close to him, it would be too dangerous. As for himself, his physical body was also very strong. Moreover, he had the armor of earth as a trump card, so he did not really need this silver armor. After receiving the silver armor, Mo Yunqi smiled from ear to ear. Brother Yi, you're a good person, a very good person. Yi Xian and the others. At this moment, Yi Xian and the others suddenly turned around. Not far away from them stood an old man and a black-robed man. The old man was the dean of Karaki Academy, Li Xuansong. Li Xuansong glanced at Yi Xian and the others and smiled. Congratulations, you've successfully killed the geniuses of dozens of superforces, haha. He laughed maniacally. Chapter 97. Although Yi Xian didn't die in this mystic realm, Li Xuanzong's goal was achieved. Making enemies. How many enemies did Yi Xian and Songlan Academy make in this battle? Not to mention others, just Great Cloud Empire's Karaki Academy and Dark World's Assassin Organization. Any one of them wasn't something that Songlan Academy could resist. And now, Songlan Academy didn't just defend one, but two. Apart from that, there were also countless aristocratic families and some academies from other countries. Thinking of the forces that Songlan Academy would face next, Li Xuanzong's laughter instantly became even crazier. Beside Yi Xian, Mo Yunqi glanced at Li Xuanzong. I really want to beat this bastard to death. Yi Xian nodded. Beat him? Mo Yunqi glared at Yi Xian. You want me to make the first move again? Yi Xian. At this moment, Li Xuanzong stopped and glanced at Yi Xian and the others. Finally, his gaze landed on Yi Xian. Wait for your death. With that, he and the black-robed man beside him turned and disappeared into the horizon. In the battlefield. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian glanced at the corpses on the ground not far away. Collect the spoils of war. Mo Yunqi chuckled and took the lead to rush out. Spoils of war. These people weren't ordinary people, so the things they brought with them were all supreme grade. Apart from the most precious silver armor, Yi Xian also obtained nearly 7 supreme-grade spiritual weapons, among which there were 5 to 600,000 supreme-grade spirit stones, and a storage ring. Mo Yunqi and the others also gained a lot, and each of them obtained several supreme-grade spiritual weapons. Sudden riches. True sudden riches. Because a supreme-grade spiritual weapon could be sold for millions of gold coins, and now, each of them had several. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian walked in front of Zhang Jiu, took out 2 supreme-grade spiritual weapons and handed them to Zhang Jiu. For you. Zhang Jiu glanced at Yi Xian. What are you doing? Yi Xian grinned. I can't let you come here for nothing. Zhang Jiu said coldly. Am I here for these 2 supreme-grade spiritual weapons? Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Mo Yunqi, who was at the side, suddenly smiled. Bandit Yi, the 9th princess is obviously here for you, you fool. At this moment, the 9th princess suddenly disappeared. Bang! Mo Yunqi's entire body was sent flying several feet away before crashing heavily onto the ground. The 9th princess looked at Mo Yunqi, who was on the ground. You know too much. Mo Yunqi. At the side, Bai Zhe gave the 9th princess a thumbs up. Good hit, great hit. You made her squeak in pain. Everyone. At that moment, Jianji suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Don't you like men? Everyone looked at Jianji. Zhang Jiu also looked at Jianji. Jianji pointed at Yi Xian. He once told me that he only likes men. Yi Xian. Everyone looked at Yi Xian when they heard him. They all had an odd expression on their faces. Mo Yunqi got up and sized up Yi Xian, and he said seriously, Bandit Yi, don't tell me you really like men? What the hell? Tell me, do you have any feelings for me? F***CK. Let me tell you, I'm not gay. You'd better give up early. Yi Xian's face darkened. At this moment, Bai Zhe, who was by his side, suddenly moved a few steps to the right. When Bai Zhe looked at him, his gaze was especially strange, and there was a trace of vigilance. Yi Xian. Yi Xian was slightly speechless. He wanted to explain, but if he did, Jianji might explode. This woman was usually a foodie, but when she got serious, she was extremely terrifying. But if he didn't explain, not far away from Yi Xian, Zhang Jiu glanced at Yi Xian, and there was a trace of a smile in her eyes. She naturally didn't believe that Yi Xian liked men. Would a man who liked men be interested in women? But this guy before her was obviously interested in Xiaoen. And that time in the waterfall pit, Zhang Jiu's face suddenly turned slightly red as she thought of certain scenes. But she quickly returned to normal. At this moment, Sword Xiaowang suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Everyone looked at Sword Xiaowang. Sword Xiaowang sized up Yi Xian. You're injured now. Sword Xiaowang, won't take advantage of you. When the time comes, I'll head to Songlan Academy to challenge you. Yi Xian nodded. I'll wait for you. Sword Xiaowang didn't say anything else and turned to leave. Mo Yunqi, who was beside Yi Xian, glanced at Sword Xiaowang. This guy isn't bad. He didn't take advantage of me earlier. He's a person with character. Yi Xian said softly. Not everyone is a vile person. As he spoke, he looked at Gong Qingqing, who was not far away. Gong Qingqing smiled. Congratulations. Yi Xian clasped his fists. Many thanks. Gong Qingqing brought Yi Ling to Yi Xian. Yi Ling walked to Yi Xian's side. She held onto Yi Xian's hand tightly, as though she was afraid that Yi Xian would disappear. Yi Xian gently rubbed Yi Ling's head before looking at Gong Qingqing. Gong Qingqing smiled. Brother Yi, although you've gotten rid of the danger this time, do you know that you're going to face an even greater danger? The trouble between you and Songlan Academy has only just begun. Yi Xian remained silent. Gong Qingqing glanced at Yi Xian and the rest. Those who came here were carefully nurtured by some forces. Today all of them died in your hands. Those forces will surely not let this matter rest. Especially Tsongmu Academy of Great Cloud Empire and Dark World. These two forces attach great importance to their reputation. Today their people have died here. They will surely seek revenge. But this time, those forces won't be talking about rules with you. As he spoke, he shook his head with a smile. Simply put, now is the time to compete for backing. And now, it's not something I can intervene in. Everyone, if you have time, please come to Great Cloud Empire. If you can tide through this crisis safely, I believe that you will come to Great Cloud Empire soon. After all, that place is the real stage. Farewell. After speaking, he clasped his fists at Yi Xian and the rest before turning to leave. Mo Yunqi, who was standing beside Yi Xian, suddenly spoke. Is he trying to befriend us? Zhang Jiu spoke indifferently. If you can live well and become more outstanding, he will befriend you. But if you are an idiot, I'm afraid he won't even bother to speak a word with you. Some geniuses are extremely arrogant. They only recognize outstanding people and will only befriend outstanding people. Mo Yunqi nodded. Understood. Zhang Jiu turned to look at Yi Xian. Flee. Flee? Everyone looked at Zhang Jiu. Zhang Jiu looked straight at Yi Xian. You have to flee. If you don't flee, you won't be able to survive. Flee now and wait for the next day. Yi Xian shook his head. Zhang Jiu raged. Can't you be more flexible? There's nothing shameful about fleeing. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. If I flee, what will happen to Mo Himao and the rest? What will happen to Tsonglan Academy? Zhang Jiu remained silent. Yi Xian looked at Mo Yunqi and the rest. My sister and I have no worries. We can flee anywhere. But Mo Himao and Bai Zhe are different. You have your clans. If I flee, those people will definitely find trouble with you or your clans. Speaking of this, he looked at Zhang Jiu. They might even find trouble with you. Zhang Jiu remained silent. Mo Yunqi sighed in a low voice. Bandit Yi, it's better for you to flee. As for us. Yi Xian shook his head and interrupted Mo Yunqi's words. Say no more. As he spoke, he pulled Yi Ling's hand and smiled. We are brother and sister. If we dare to do something, we dare to admit it. At this moment, Zhang Jiu suddenly said, Actually, everyone is already in the same boat. Those people will not let little Yi go, let alone Songlan Academy. As she spoke, she glanced at Mo Yunqi and the other two. If the three of you are weak and an idiot, you might have a chance to survive. But the three of you are not weak and your talents are extremely strong. Those people will not let the three of you go. They will definitely kill all of you. Mo Yunqi shook his head and sighed. Being too outstanding is also a mistake. Bai Zhe glanced at Mo Yunqi. Your skin is thicker than my butt. Mo Yunqi glared at Bai Zhe. If you don't speak, no one will treat you as a mute. Bai Zhe said indifferently, I don't like the look of you. Mo Yunqi retreated a few feet and waved at Bai Zhe. Come and hit me. Bai Zhe was speechless. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He looked at Zhang Jiu and was about to speak. Just at this moment, a little girl appeared on the scene. Seeing this little girl, Yi Xian was instantly stunned. He knew this little girl. She was the little girl who gifted the heavenly fire-warm jade to Yi Ling. The little girl wore a pink cotton-padded jacket and had a long whip tied behind her head. She looked like she was carved from jade and looked very cute. Unfortunately, her eyes were too cold. The little girl ignored the surrounding people and walked in front of Yi Ling. At this moment, Xueqi suddenly walked in front of the little girl. He sized up the little girl and smiled mischievously. "Little girl, you are really cute. Where are your parents?" As he spoke, he was about to touch the whip behind the little girl's head. Bang! Without any warning, Xueqi flew out. A few dozen feet away, Xueqi heavily landed on the ground and directly smashed a huge deep pit on the ground. In the deep pit, Xueqi wailed. "Damn it! It hurts." "Everyone." The little girl looked at Yi Ling. "Come with me." Hearing this, Yi Xian directly stood in front of Yi Ling. He looked at the little girl warily. The little girl coldly looked at Yi Xian. "Can you protect her?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice. "I will protect her with my life." The little girl coldly said, "Is your life useful?" Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but the little girl coldly said, "In Great Cloud Empire's Karaki College, although there are not many Dharma realm experts, it is still easy to have 10 or 20 of them. In addition, there is also Dark World. This assassin organization has successfully assassinated experts above Dharma realm. In addition to these two forces, there are countless forces in Qingzhou. They will all come to take revenge on you. At that time, what can you protect her with?" Yi Xian clenched his fists and his face was a little ugly. At this moment, Yi Ling suddenly whispered, "Brother, I want to go with her." Yi Xian's body slightly trembled. He turned to look at Yi Ling. In an instant without warning, 2 lines of tears flowed down from his eyes. Begging for subscriptions. Begging for tickets. Chapter 98. Everyone present here was slightly shocked when they saw Yi Xian cry. Especially Zhang Jiao and the others. They knew Yi Xian's character very well. He was definitely a man who would bleed but not cry. However, at this moment, a single sentence from Yi Ling had caused him to cry. It was obvious how important Yi Ling was to Yi Xian. The little girl was slightly surprised as well. She knew a little about Yi Xian, and she'd watched the entire battle from before. Even though she didn't like Yi Xian, she had to admit that he was a man. Especially how he dared to fight and was fearless, and she admired him slightly. Yet at this moment, just because of a single sentence from Yi Ling, this fellow actually. She had to admit that this fellow really cared about his younger sister. This sort of care wasn't based on benefits at all. Yi Ling's tears instantly flowed down as well, and she just gazed at Yi Xian. "Big brother, I want to become strong as well." Yi Xian fell silent. Yi Ling wiped away the tears on her face. "I don't want to be a burden to Big Brother, nor do I want to be captured and used to threaten Big Brother. Big Brother, I want to become strong. I want to be able to help you in the future." Yi Xian walked over to Yi Ling, and he lightly wiped away the tears on Yi Ling's face. "Big Brother is useless. I wasn't able to protect you properly." Yi Ling shook her head, and her tears flowed down without end. "I'm useless. I've only been a burden to Big Brother since I was young. I'm useless." Yi Xian grinned. "Don't cry. You've turned into a dirty cat." Yi Ling pulled Yi Xian to squat down, and she lightly wiped away the tears on Yi Xian's face. "Big Brother, I'll definitely become strong. I definitely will. At that time, I'll definitely protect you properly, just like how you protect me." Yi Xian grinned. He gently wiped the tears off Yi Ling's face, not saying a word. Right at this moment, the little girl at the side suddenly said, "Her physique is special. You can only temporarily maintain her life with the fire spirit. This isn't a long-term solution at all. She can only return to the frigid north sect with me to completely solve the problem with her body." Yi Xian turned around and looked at the little girl. The little girl looked straight at Yi Xian and said, "You can't protect her forever. She needs to be able to protect herself. If she joins the frigid north sect, we'll do our best to train her." At this moment, Old Ji appeared next to Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at Old Ji, and Old Ji glanced at Yi Ling. "This girl has a special constitution. The frigid north sect will be the best place for her." Yi Xian lowered his head slightly. "She has never been far from me." Old man Ji sighed softly and didn't say anything. At this moment, the little girl's voice suddenly rang in Yi Xian's mind. "Have you thought about your current situation? If she stays by your side, she'll definitely die. If she joins the Frigid North sect, we have the ability to protect her. I know you love her, but don't let your love turn into selfishness. Selfishness. Yi Xian slowly clenched his fists. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian. After a while, Yi Xian suddenly turned around and looked at Yi Ling. He smiled and said, "Okay, I promise you." Yi Ling wasn't happy. Instead, she cried even harder. Because this meant that she would really have to leave her brother. Yi Xian gently rubbed Yi Ling's head and smiled. "Don't cry." Then, he pulled Yi Ling to the little girl. "Senior, please take care of my sister." The little girl was about to hold Yi Ling's hand when Yi Xian suddenly said, "She's weak and doesn't like to fight. If she goes to the Frigid North sect, she'll be bullied." Don't worry." The little girl coldly looked at Yi Xian. "If she comes with me to the Frigid North sect, no one in the Frigid North sect will dare to bully her." Yi Xian glanced at the little girl, then turned around and put a ring in Yi Ling's hand. This ring was the storage ring that he had seized earlier, and inside it was all his belongings. Yi Xian grinned. "Don't be too weak when you go to the Frigid North sect. If anyone bullies you, bully them back. If you can't beat them, send a message to me and I'll help you. Understand?" Yi Ling wiped the tears off her face and nodded. "Okay." Then the little girl suddenly said, "You can keep this storage ring for yourself. She doesn't need anything when she goes to the Frigid North sect." Yi Xian looked at the little girl. "I'm giving it to my sister." The little girl interrupted Yi Xian. "If you're giving her something good, can't you give her something good? I'll be embarrassed if she brings all the rubbish in your storage ring to the Frigid North sect." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Damn it, there are all supreme-grade spiritual artifacts in there. This is rubbish?" Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Old Ji said, "Keep it for yourself. You need these now, and this girl won't lack these things when she goes to the Frigid North sect." Yi Ling also put the storage ring back in Yi Xian's hand. She took out a wooden figurine and waved it around. She grinned at Yi Xian. "This is enough." This wooden figurine was 80 to 90% similar to Yi Xian. Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but the little girl suddenly grabbed Yi Ling's hand and was about to leave. At this time, Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Where is the Frigid North sect?" The little girl glanced at Yi Xian. Clearly, she didn't want to say it. Old Ji suddenly said, "If he's in the Frigid North sect, even if he's not the best, he won't be weak. If he becomes the Sword Master, or the Sword Emperor, or even higher, it's a great thing for the Frigid North sect, isn't it?" The little girl fell silent. Yi Ling was now a member of the Frigid North sect. In all fairness, she didn't want Yi Ling to have anything to do with Yi Xian. However, if Yi Xian became the Sword Master, the Sword Emperor, or even the Sword Immortal, it would be a super external aid for the Frigid North sect. After a moment of silence, the little girl looked at Yi Xian. The Frigid North sect, the Frigid North land. At this point, she sent a voice transmission to Yi Xian. "The Frigid North sect doesn't forbid you from interacting with this girl, but it depends on your future achievements. If you can't become a sword master before the age of 30, don't come back. Because by then, you'll be a burden to her." With that, she pulled Yi Ling away and disappeared into the horizon. Down below, Yi Xian was stunned. The next moment, he shouted angrily at the sky. "Girl, wait for me. I'll come find you." "Wait for me." A weak voice came from the distant horizon. "Brother?" Yi Xian stared blankly at the sky for a long time. Finally, he retracted his gaze and lay down on the ground. He looked at the sky, his eyes somewhat hollow. Mo Yunqi hesitated and wanted to comfort him, but was stopped by Old Ji. Old Ji said, "Let him think for himself. Think for himself. There were many times in life when there were obstacles. These obstacles could be overcome as long as one guessed it." Before long, Yi Xian suddenly sat up and clenched his fists. "I want to become the Sword Master. No, I want to become the Sword Emperor. No, I want to become the Sword Immortal. I want to become the Sword Immortal. Sword Immortal." If he were the Sword Immortal, would Kuraki Academy dare to bully him? If he were the Sword Immortal, would his sister, Yi Ling, be bullied again and again? If he were the Sword Immortal, weakness was the original sin. If he didn't have strength, it would be difficult to protect family, friendship, and love. Reality was cruel. If he didn't want reality to be cruel, he could only become stronger. At this point, Yi Xian instantly felt his mind clear. Goal. This time, he had a real goal for himself. To become a sword immortal. At this moment, the Lingxiu sword within Yi Xian's body suddenly trembled violently. Immediately after, the Lingxiu sword shot into the sky from Yi Xian's body. Everyone was stunned when they saw this. The Lingxiu sword above Yi Xian's head trembled violently. At this moment, the Lingxiu sword gave everyone a strange feeling. It was extremely strange. Not far away, Old Ji glanced at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. He was about to speak when the ground suddenly trembled. Very quickly, the surroundings actually warped. Old Ji frowned slightly when he saw this. This mystic realm is about to disappear. Let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand and everyone vanished on the spot. Outside the mystic realm, Old Ji and the others landed on the ground. Suddenly, Old Ji turned to look. One person was missing. Yi Xian was missing. Old Ji suddenly turned to look at the mystic realm. However, it had already vanished. He was about to attack when a voice silently entered Old Ji's mind. A moment later, Old Ji said softly, "It's him." Yi Xian suddenly felt dizzy and extremely heavy as if his head was filled with lead. After an unknown period of time, this feeling gradually disappeared. Yi Xian shook his head with all his might and opened his eyes. At this moment, he was in a cave. A middle-aged man sat cross-legged before him. The middle-aged man wore a white robe and looked very refined. However, this was an illusion and not a physical body. Yi Xian looked around and then looked at the middle-aged man. "Senior?" The middle-aged man opened his eyes and looked at Yi Xian. He sized up Yi Xian and smiled. A dual cultivator of the sword and martial arts, and a hidden realm. This hidden realm is also different from ordinary hidden realms. Most importantly, you don't have a dantian, but your battle strength is not weak at all. Especially your sword intent. I have seen some swordsmen and know of Dao Yi's sword intent, but I have never seen a sword intent like yours. It really shocked me. Yi Xian looked a little wary. The middle-aged man smiled. "Don't worry, I have no ill intentions towards you. I'm just a little curious about your master. I wonder if you can tell me his name?" Yi Xian shook his head. The middle-aged man nodded slightly. "Fine, I won't force it." As he said that, he sized up Yi Xian. "You can be said to be a triple cultivator of martial arts, body, and sword. I'm not good at body and sword, but I know a thing or two about martial arts. If the person behind you doesn't mind, I can give you some pointers in martial arts and Dao Yi." Yi Xian was stunned and then quickly said, "Of course I don't mind. But why?" The middle-aged man smiled. "If my Ning country is in trouble in the future, please do your best to help." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "You are from the Ning country." The middle-aged man nodded. "Is there a problem?" Yi Xian nodded. "No problem." The middle-aged man smiled. "I will teach you a move. Battle intent condensation." As his voice fell, he opened his right hand. The next moment, a monstrous battle intent appeared in his palm. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. "Although you have battle intent, it isn't strong. The reason is because the battle intent in your heart isn't strong enough. At the end of the day, battle intent is the word, battle. Think about the scene when you comprehended battle intent for the first time. The scene when he comprehended battle intent for the first time? A scene appeared in Yi Xian's mind. Outside Two World City, he blocked 3,000 cavalrymen alone. At that moment, he forgot about life and death. He forgot about his sister. There was only one word in his heart and mind: battle. No matter who he was facing, no matter how many people he faced, he would fight. Fight to the death. As he thought of this, a sword suddenly flew out from his body. The next moment, an intent suddenly shook out from his elegant spirit sword. This elegant spirit sword didn't emit sword intent, but battle intent. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.